We're at that order of business of bills on third reading and final passage. Majority Whip Western, would you come up and take control?
The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 52. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 52, sponsored by Representative Summers. Property tax, homestead exemption, an act relating to taxation being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What do you know? There are amendments. Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 52 and ask for your, I know the light's on, but it's not. I'll change. How about this one? Oh, yeah, there we go. I'm sorry, you're going to have to listen to me. I'd like to move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 52 and ask for your favorable consideration. So, corrected copy. Corrected copy. And ask for your favorable consideration. And so I want to review where I think we're at on my bill, House Bill 52. I think one of the last amendments, originally it was a staggered, if you were less than 65, you got a certain amount of money, went from 65 to 74, you got a certain amount, and then 75 and up. And then on an amendment in second reading, that took it to $100,000 across the board for primary residences. So that's where the bill stands now, so everybody knows. I got to thinking about the bill and what we were trying to do, and as I looked at all these bills, and what you have to also realize about my bill, the way it's crafted now, it doesn't go into effect until 2025, and then it would be a 3-year deal. And I got to thinking to myself, well, we don't have anything that's immediate relief. And so I went and talked to that good agency, that department that does revenue. And I asked them, well, what do we need to do to have an effective immediate? In other words, something that works right now. And so it has to be structured similar to another bill from the Good Country Lawyer. And really what this does is it changes it from primary residences, and you can see this in the amendment on lines 7 and 9. It changes it from primary residence to single-family residential structures, which are already in their system. This can be done immediately. So this would make this immediate. And then what it does is it just does the first $30,000 of fair market value. So you ask yourself, well, we've been talking about $100,000. Well, that was for a primary residence. When you go to single-family residential structures, an individual could be eligible for more than one. You know, I think of lots of people that might have 2 houses. But if we want to have immediate relief in 2024 to our people, I think we have to have this language. So the question then is how much? At $30,000, it's roughly $47 million a year. So $94 million would be the total spend, because that would be how much fiscal impact it would create. This bill has about I think the bill now has about 125 million or 23 million, I think 23 million of 123.4 million of backfill for local government. So basically that's what I'm doing. There's 2 approaches to this. So you'll see I have 2 of these. One is 30,000, one is 40,000. There's another approach that I think you'll be seeing, I haven't seen if it's numbered, that would use a percentage instead of a dollar amount. And so I want to ask you folks to think, do you want to have immediate relief? And if so, how do you want it to look? And so that's what I'm trying to do here. So I would obviously stand for questions and urge your support.
Any discussion on the amendment? Representative Chestik for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And question for the bringer. In my district, in the Fair City University town across the hill, there's a lot of families who have their primary residences, but they have renovated their basements or other parts of the house for a one-apartment rental unit for students. Sometimes those units are occupied, sometimes they're not. Would that be, would they now be disqualified from this exemption because it is no longer a single-family residence if they have a tenant periodically and not even for the full year in the basement?
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question for the good speaker then. This 30,000 exemption of fair market value, is that roughly about $200 per homeowner? Is that what that number is? Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Chairman's want, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just my question is, you are now basically everybody who has a second or third home, or you don't even need to be a Wyoming resident, you could have your second home here, and they would get the same benefit. Or if you were an investor and you had 10 or 15 or 20 rental houses, instead of it now being your primary residence, all of your investment properties would also qualify. So which is fine, and I think we have to do that to offer the immediate relief this year. But my question is that really where we want to go as a body, giving everybody who has a second or third home, especially in our Northwest County, the same relief as opposed to more targeted relief at just our, primary owner-occupied residences that are struggling? So is there any other way to do this and give immediate relief without broadening it based on, the assessor system? And apparently there's not if we're at third reading and this is the way the amendment, but perhaps were there other ways we could have gone about it?
Any further discussion? Any other member for their first time? Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and I'll apologize to the bringer of the bill and the amendment. I just want to make sure, it looks like this is kind of just immediate relief only and it doesn't continue. I know there was a longer term sunset on this, but if you can just speak briefly to that as well.
Any other member for their first time? Any member for their first time? Any other member for their second time before the sponsor? The sponsor, Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and to the good chairman of Revenue, that's in fact correct. $200 is what I've been told. And to the good chair of Labor, this is the only immediate relief that I could find available. And so this is the reason. And yes, single-family residential structures, so you could have 2 or 3 of them. That's why it's less than the 100, right? The 100,000 provided, I guess, more relief for the primary resident holder while still not having the fiscal impact. But if you want to provide immediate relief, and so this is the question to the body, we can extend it out and do it the way it is now, or we can try to provide immediate relief. And I'm also, just so you know, I'm also going to try to, I'll bring an amendment later that's a 1-year bigger one, so do we want to just do a 1-year big one or a bigger one? And so it's really a question for the body. And I'm not saying there's a right or a wrong, but if we want immediate relief, we got to go down this path. And there's 2 paths. There's the dollar amount, or you can do a percentage. And I think we'll see an amendment later that does a percentage. It's not mine, but anyway, thank you. Appreciate your support.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 52, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 52 is adopted. The next amendment for our consideration is Third reading amendment number 2, Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I'd like to move third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 52. And so this is and I had to withdraw my second reading amendment to try to solve this problem. So we put out 2 exemption bills already, and this would be the third one. And the question is, should they all layer together or shouldn't they? And so I'm saying in this that no, they shouldn't, and that you should have to choose between them, except the one that's the cap. And so what this would do is it says an owner who receives a homestead exemption under this paragraph shall not be entitled to any additional property tax exemption for or related to the residential real property in the same tax year except for an exemption where the amount of exemption is determined based upon the amount of assessed value that is in excess of the prior year assessed value. So the cap bill wouldn't be affected, but if you think that of that long-term old-time bill we had, this would say, hey, if these both pass, you're gonna have to choose one over the other and they won't layer. So I thought I'd bring this as a way to manage the bills that are out there in the landscape. And so with that, I would stand for any questions or call the question.
Members, is there any discussion on the amendment? Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So if this gentleman has a VA exemption on his property tax, he's got to choose one or the other?
Any further discussion for the first time? Representative Larson.
I might just suggest that I think some of the veteran stuff, those are refunds and not exemptions.
Any further discussion? For their first time, Representative Stivar. Any further discussion for the first time, Representative Craigo?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would just say I think they're different based on the language. One's called the veterans exemption, one's called the homestead exemption, and this particular amendment only applies to homestead. So as I read it, you could still apply for both.
Any further discussion? Any member for their first time? Any member for their second time before the sponsor? To the sponsor, Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you to the good representative from here in this city. It says an owner who receives a homestead exemption under this paragraph shall not be entitled to any additional property tax exemption. So in other words, I don't think you probably can layer another exemption, so he would have to choose between the veterans or this one. That's how I read it. But he wouldn't be ineligible for the veterans, he would just have to choose. So the question, that's the question. So do you want to layer them or not layer them? Thank you.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 52, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. Third reading amendment number 2 has been adopted. The next reading, division being called, all those in favor say aye. Or excuse me, please rise. Sorry, a little tired. All those opposed, please stand. That amendment is adopted with 45 ayes. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 52. Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. I'd like to move third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 52 and ask for your favorable consideration. So this is if you want to spend more money. So this goes to $40,000, and what the cost is roughly $62.7 million a year, or roughly $125.4 million. And so that's the deal. If you want to spend more, you can spend more. If you don't, vote against it. It's pretty simple.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Any amendment? Or any further discussion? Seeing none? Speaker Summers, would you like another crack at it? Okay, question being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 52, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. Chairs in doubt. All those in favor, please stand. All those in favor, please stand and stay standing and stay still. Albert, you're down? Okay. That's 31, including me. Okay. All those opposed, please stand. Is adopted. 31 to 25 vote. Third reading amendment number 3 is adopted on a 31 to 25 vote. The next next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 52. Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to move third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 52 and ask for your favorable consideration. So, ladies and gentlemen, so what this would do is it would be a one-year shot. In other words, we would try to provide a larger shot one time instead of spread over 2 years. And so if we want to get relief out quicker at a higher rate, this is what I brought that would allow you to do that. And so what this does is it goes to 60,000, and it's good, and it's for 1 year. And this one would be 94 million. 94 million would be the economic, the fiscal impact. Let's put it that way. So that I would stand for questions.
Members, any discussion? Representative Storr for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. Just as a reminder, we have a constitutional amendment that's going to be on the ballot in November. It looks like we're not going to get rid of that. Once that passes, and I believe it will pass, then this body will have an opportunity to decide what to do long-term for property tax, and whether we want to change that and who we want to change it for, and that will give us a lot more options. But if we do want to do immediate relief today, I think this is the way to go, because we can get more bang for our buck for 1 year and address that now, and address what has been, frankly, hundreds of millions of dollars in additional revenue for the state that's come in from these high property values, especially in the northwest part of the state. So I'm on and for the amendment. Thank you.
Any further discussion on the amendment? Chairman Brown for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Majority something or other. I like the idea of doing a one-time. I agree with the previous speaker on this. I am curious, As much as I like Christmas trees and as much as I like seeing lights on Christmas trees, I am curious how many lights we've put on this Christmas tree. I feel like we can see this one from space now. And I feel like we have really gussied this Christmas tree up to make it look really, really good. And it's probably going to win a contest for how good it looks. But how much is this ultimately
Chairman
going to
Brown,
cost us?
on the amendment, please.
Oh, I'm on the amendment. I'm curious how much the electricity cost on this particular bill is going to cost us, right? So if we do this one time, plus the amendment we just adopted, plus the amendment we just adopted prior to that, what's our running total on this particular bill up to this point? Thank you.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Hi, thank you, Mr. Chairman. I do think it needs to be said that if you do vote yes on this amendment, you'll get that valley, which is great for a year, but then in 2 years, you get that slight bump again, and I'm not sure that's what we want to see long-term. I'm all for the immediate relief, but then I'm pretty positive we'll be back here next year saying, well, now you have to keep that same level. I just don't believe you're going to have a one-time bump, and then when that increase hits again in 2025, 26, that we're all going to say, yeah, well, we gave you a one-time some relief, but now we're jumping it up again on you. So keep that in mind with your vote.
Any other member? Mr. Minority Floor Leader, for your first time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. So with the Christmas tree analogy, many of these amendments actually just take off the previous lights and put on a brighter light. I think this light is just going to burn very brightly and clearly then burn out in a year. So I don't think the Christmas tree analogy works out super great because, again, this one just removes the first amendment that we adopted as well as the third amendment that we adopted. So it's really just choosing between all of the choices. And this is one choice versus another choice, which I think is what the speaker is trying to bring to us with all of these amendments. So make your choice. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any further discussion? Any member for their second time before the sponsor? To the sponsor, Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and to the good chairman of transportation. Really, this does strip out all the rest, and frankly, it strips out most of the bill and makes it a pretty simple bill. And really, this is a question of whether you want to have 2 years of relief or whether you want to have it all in 1 year of relief. I think that's the question. I think the larger bump is a better deal. I think it just is better. But you all will make that decision in your vote. So on in support.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 52, please say aye. All those opposed, say no. Thank you. Division being called. All those in favor, please stand. Representative Yin, are you in or out? All those opposed, please stand. That amendment is adopted on a 32 to 26 vote. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 52. Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, I would move third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 52 and ask for your favorable consideration. So you can, so you kind of get where I'm going. So this is a bump from the 60 to 70. If you kind of remember way back several amendments ago, we had 40,000. It was worth about 62 a year. So you have 120. And so this is kind of, if all in, this is around 110 million for a 1-year shot. So if you want a little more bump than the last one was 94. This is around 110 million. This is still within the range of what our backfill amendment is in the bill. So if you want a little more money going out, this is it. On and in favor.
Any further discussion? Any further discussion? Seeing none, to the sponsor, would you like another crack at it? Speaker Summers for your second time.
Mr. Chairman, thank you, and just a little indulgence. You know, this might seem like a waste of time, and maybe it is, but I think it's really, what do we want in this relief bill? I think it's worth the discussion to understand what the body wants. And so I do appreciate your time, and I'm sorry I'm the one bringing all these.
Will we go 5 for 5? All those in favor of third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 52, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed say no. No. Third reading amendment number 5 has failed. The next division being called. All those in favor, please stand. Representative Brown, are you in or are you out? All those opposed, please stand. That amendment is adopted, 35 to 24. Third reading amendment next amendment for consideration is third reading amendment number 6. Representative Storer.
Oh. Test, test, test. All right, if I get close. I can go to the higher one, too. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I bring amendment number 6 to House Bill 52.
Representative Storer, you need to move the amendment. Thank you.
I move amendment number 6 to House Bill 52 and ask for your favorable consideration. So thank you all for actually indulging in the past votes. It's really helpful to kind of think about what we are trying to do and what we want to do here. The idea here is to bring immediate relief and to take advantage of the opportunity that we have with some of the funds that have come in, especially from property tax. The Constitution still says that all tax should be equal and uniform within each class of property. And frankly, in order to do that, in order to keep with that, if we are going to give an exemption that's this broad, that goes to everyone, we should try to do it in a way that is as equal and uniform as possible. So the best way to do that, I believe, is by bringing a percentage value rather than a dollar value to the exemption. And I'll try to explain some simple math there and why that makes sense. As you know, similar homes in different parts of the state have different values, and thus they're taxed differently. So if you take a kind of traditional, typical 3-bedroom, 2-bath, 2,000 square foot house on a quarter-acre lot, for example, here in the county we're in now, that's probably about $2,000 in taxes. Perhaps in northern Lincoln County, it's maybe something more like $3,200. In Teton County, the tax you'll pay on that house is $10,788.26. So if we choose just a dollar number, everybody gets the same amount. I don't know where we were at exactly with the 70,000. I think that's maybe $400. But if we choose a percentage, then we will return to people at least a uniform amount of the assessed amount that they have been taxed, especially over the last 2 years, where we've seen such large double-digit increases. I'm not as concerned about my millionaire constituents, but I am concerned about my hardworking families who do live in homes like that and are paying 5-figure property tax. And that's really what we're trying to do here. If we're going to go ahead and move this forward, I think this is the way to do it. We can do this 1 year, and then we can come back next year and talk about what we want to do long-term. So thank you very much.
Any other member for their first time? Representative Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on the amendments we heard just prior to this, the amender was able to give us a kind of a wild guess about the dollar number attached. So do you have a dollar number?
Any other member for their first time? Representative Byron.
Thank you, Chairman. The dollar number will be coming, Body. I think it's really important to remember that it's not just, we're not talking about where the mountains are pointy and there's original first parks in the nation. You know, I think it's important to know that every one of your communities has these people, that they started 20, 30, 40, 50 years ago at a very low number, and the market has taken them there. So I think we have a lot of communities where we live and play and represent that have this exact same issue going on, where a dollar figure applied uniformly doesn't work, but a percentage does. So on and for this amendment, and I hope you guys will consider supporting it as well.
Any other member for their first time? Representative Allred.
Thank you. I like this idea, especially from the county where I come from. It sounds fair to me, so I vote aye.
Representative Henderson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So when you do the math, to me, it doesn't seem so well. You know, say take 10% of 100,000 and compare that to 10% of 300,000. They're considerably different, And so each of us has their own perception of what equal is, fair, and so on. So I think a specific number for 1 year, and then we come back and we take another look at it and we keep working on it. There's a lot of disparity between or among the counties, as you know, and I think it makes more sense to start out with quick relief, specified amount, and then people can understand it. Thank you.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and in favor, unless my math is wrong. I was never good at math. Average home, I believe, is somewhere around 360, which would make 25% at about 90. In the last amendment we had placed that at 70. I see this as a bigger kickback. If we also had something like 400 million plus in excess property taxes, I like what I'm hearing.
Chairman Harshman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So just, and I really appreciate this debate. It's probably been the best debate on property taxes, this subject, of our entire time together in the 67th, which only has another week and a half left, and then we'll be done down here. But I think all taxes are regressive. And we've had this argument about sales tax regressiveness, and I think regressivity, and I think, there's different ways to study and look at it. You can find studies to prove any of that, but I just show the numbers that I have in my head, this 25%. So the average house in Teton County is right at 4 million, just a shade under. So that refund will be about 7,000 per the average. And then the average in Wyoming is about 300,000 if you take the Teton average out, the other counties, and they'll receive about $210. So, which is fine. This is a policy decision, but just so you kind of know what those numbers look like as we're voting. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Any other member for their first time? Representative Locke.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And one thing I want people to keep in mind as they're calculating their numbers is this is structure only. Okay, keep in mind that as you go through the numbers, as I read this is structure only. So you have to keep that in mind as you're doing your assessment of how this stacks up. Thank you.
Any other member for the first time? Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And I'm probably going to vote against this amendment. Is it more equal? Maybe. I think that's something you all have to decide. I think this is a real good debate. I think, in fact, in the interim, I think this committee debated this on another bill you'll see coming across. It's whether you do by percentage or whether you do by a flat rate. I'm going to vote against it, but it's a good debate. I don't know what's right or wrong on this one.
Any other member for their first time? Seeing none, any member for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Zwanitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm still excited to know what the total number is, because we have an obligation on the backside, because we're going to be taking money out of our school foundations, we're going to be maybe taking it away from our cities and counties. And I think that it's an important number for the body to know, because that money has to come from somewhere. And so if you have your best guess, I would very much appreciate it.
Any other member for their second time before the sponsor? To the sponsor, Representative Storer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and apologies for forgetting that part. So 2 comments. One is most of the amendments all look the same as Speaker Summers because we didn't know where the body was going to end up.
Representative Storer, no formal names, please.
Sorry. So the important part of the amendment is lines 20 through 23 that replace the language on page 2, line 9, that puts the 25% amount in rather than 70,000. This was calculated to equal where the bill was originally with 40,000 over 2 years. So the calculation is that it will cost $125 million, the same as where we started. So what was 62.7 times 2 years is now just over 1 year. That number can change, but that was where the bill started. So we asked the Department of Revenue to calculate that on residential structures. Now this does only apply to residential structures. That is not the entire taxable amount for many folks, especially in Teton County where the land is worth a huge amount as well. But it certainly will help a number of folks around the state. And the idea, once again, of the percentage is that we're trying to give a break to folks who have already paid $10,000 in taxes over the last 2 years, for example. That this is where we're really going to help those folks out. And, if your house is worth $200,000, and you've paid $1,000, you're still going to get $250 back at 25%. So it's, I think, quite meaningful across the state. It's a good number, and I really appreciate the support and the understanding that much of the burden of property tax has come from the northwest part of the state. More than $197 million in property tax was paid last year from Teton County. Now, that resulted in $82 million coming into the school foundation program. And that's kind of amazing. But this is one way to give some of that money back to folks who really are struggling. Thank you very much.
We are voting on third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 52. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed say no. That amendment is not adopted. The next amendment, I'm sorry, Representative Starr, could you say that again? Are you calling for division? All those in favor, please stand. All those opposed, please stand. On a 29-29 vote, that amendment is not adopted. But wait, there's more. Third reading amendment number 7 to House Bill 52 is up for consideration. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd move such amendment, number 7, and as the last amendment on this, and I appreciate the discussion. And this really moves this as a one-time exemption to an even $100,000 on every residential structure, just like the previous one's a good speaker up. And here's my thoughts behind this. This will cost $130 million. There's 123.30. There's basically it's going to cost what's in this bill. But you think of a package for our people, and we've got that little bill coming here at the end of third reading that was cut in half, but hopefully we'll return it to its original state. So our people would have 100,000 next year, 200,000 the next year, and then $1 million every year after that. And I just think that you can kind of give some hope and put our people on a glide path on how, and it's easy to explain on how this thing will work. So I'd stand for any questions. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Members, any further discussion on the amendment? Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. And so I was given a formula, the good chair of revenue was given a chart. So according to my formula, which is based on averages, it's about 150 some million, not 130. But based upon some work he's done, it be on maybe real data. So, you know, one thing, I'm going to guess it's somewhere in between all of that. And, but just so you know, I'm not going to say whether I support or not support it, but the numbers either way could be up or down a bit. That's what I'm going to say.
Any further discussion? Representative Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is all very entertaining and everything, but being a taxpayer, how does this implement? I mean, what, as a taxpayer, do you have to go to the county courthouse and apply for this? Does it come in automatically? Is there some mechanism I'm missing in here somewhere? Which there probably is, but I'm trying to figure out the mechanics of this. I think it's a good idea, but how does this work?
Any other member for their first time? Any other member? Any other member for their second time for the sponsor? Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. To answer those two questions, the numbers that I gave you are based on the 2023 CAMA data survey of every property in the state. It's not an average times an average mill level. It is the actual properties and the taxes paid. And so I feel very confident in those numbers. The next question, the good representative, this will just be a lower tax bill. You don't have to apply for it. You don't have to sign an affidavit for it. You don't have to do anything. I don't think this bill has language saying, hey, your tax bill is $690 less because of this bill, but I think the word will get out. But it'll just simply be on your tax bill as deduction. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Seeing no further discussion, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 7 to House Bill 52, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, say no. No. Third reading amendment number 7 has been adopted. Seeing no further amendments, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall House Bill 52 pass the House? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clouston. Conrad. Crago. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrop. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Storer. Strzok. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers. Are there any changes? Any changes? Are there any changes? Davis? Closing vote. Vote closed. 55 aye, 6 no. 1 excused.
Having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members of the House of Representatives, House Bill 52 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 60. And there are amendments. Representative Craigo. Oh, excuse me, the reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 60, sponsored by Agriculture, Excess Wildlife Population Damage Amendments, an act relating to game and fish, be it enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
There are amendments. Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 60 and ask for your favorable consideration. So after the last couple days of debate on this particular bill, I've listened to all the concerns, and this amendment's an attempt to address a lot of those concerns. And so rather than read through the whole amendment, I'll just try to tell you what it does, and then I can answer any questions. Essentially, what it does is it takes any payment related to state lands or any reference to state lands out of the bill. So we're just dealing with private property for now. Although I may not agree with that concept, I think it's a good compromise in this particular bill. The other thing we're doing is on page 2, and this was, there were several attempts to alter this language regarding what kind of hunting is required in order to receive compensation under the bill. I'm adding the word reasonable. Reasonable hunting, you have to allow reasonable hunting, and that gives the good department that handles our wildlife some discretion, but they also can require a little bit more than what's currently in the statute. There were 2 amendments brought by a couple of our colleagues. Those are both taken out because that particular language is not needed anymore based on what we're doing here. So for example, the multiplier language on page 4, I just took all that out completely, and so the payment is strictly based on whatever the private land lease rate is as determined by the federal government, and our good department has a calculation that they have created essentially to administer this bill. We've talked to them and they can handle that. And then on section 2 on page 4, the good speaker had originally had an amendment to take that out. I objected to the amendment, and so this is an attempt of a compromise between the 2 positions. Essentially, there are places where even though the elk might be slightly over objective, we don't necessarily want to plan to reduce that number. And so this really allows the good department to bring to us their plans and efforts annually, both to the Ag Committee and to TRW, on what they're doing to address the problem, and especially in those areas where it's a large problem. And so that's what the amendment does. I would stand for any questions and ask for your aye vote.
Representative Stivar for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I've just got a question. Is reasonable anything like knowingly and willingly?
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Nyman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for this amendment, I appreciate the good banners put this together. This does bring some balance. It allows the protection of the planning and the follow-up with the committees, and will let us move this forward in a thoughtful way that I think will bring relief to the landowners that are being impacted by these. So on and for the amendment. Appreciate it.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Craigo.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would say just because you're reasonable does not mean you're knowingly, and just because you're knowingly does not mean you're reasonable.
All right. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 60 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 60 has been adopted. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 2. Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to withdraw third reading amendment number 2 at this time.
Yay. Third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 60 has been withdrawn. House Bill 60, having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemand. Allred. Andrew. Angelos. Banks. Bear. Berger. Brown. Burkhart, excused. Byron. Chadwick. Chestick. Clauston. Conrad. Craigo. Davis. Eklund. Haroldson. Harshman. Heiner. Henderson. Hornock. Jennings. Knapp. Larson Lloyd. Larson JT. Lawley. Locke. Nyman. Newsom. Nicholas. Nemec. Northrup. Oakley. Obermuller. O'Hearn. Olson. Ottman. Pendergraft. Penn. Provenza. Rodriguez Williams. Sherwood. Singh. Slagle. Smith. Stiff. Storer. Strock. Stivar. Tarver. Trujillo. Walters. Ward. Washut. Western. Winter. Wiley. Yin. Zwanitzer Dan. Zwanitzer Dave. Speaker Summers.
Aye.
Are there any changes? Brown, aye. To no. Berger, aye. To no. Knapp, no. To aye. Davis. Harshman, aye. To no. Nemec, aye. To no. Ottman, no. To aye. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 43 aye, 18 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 60, having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 60 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 125. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 125, sponsored by Representative Haroldson. Repeal gun-free zones and preemption amendments, an act relating to concealed weapons being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
Okay, so third reading amendment number 1 is a delete the enacting clause. We'll take it up last, Representative Chestic. So third reading amendment number 2 is Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Move third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 125. Ask for your favorable consideration. We had a talk on second reading about guns in hospitals. That was voted down. I did think it was a bit onerous. What this does, as you can read there in F, it says that the Board of Trustees for that hospital can decide basically the rules of carrying a firearm into that facility based on that valid concealed carry permit. I know we've had a lot of debate on guns in schools. We haven't had that same level of debate when it comes to bringing firearms into healthcare facilities. Quick reminder that 66% of workplace violence occurs in this state in your healthcare facilities, and we could be doing more to protect those workers. But in this specific instance, it really is important. You know, people come into the ERs, they're in pain, they're maybe not in the right mindset. And when you're asking nurses, doctors to treat patients, you know, there is some apprehension sometimes about treating people and saying, hey, you're going to get a couple of shots and this is going to hurt, all while carrying a firearm on them. So I'm not saying that it should be banned. I'm just saying we should leave it up to each local Board of Trustees. Many of our hospitals have a full-time security force. Certainly it would be very different than some of our rural hospitals or our critical access hospitals that have no security force, and they would very much welcome probably having certain individuals identified who would carry, you know, firearms in the event of an incident where the police could not get there, you know, immediately. So I do think it's best to leave it to local control in some instances. And so this was brought to me on behalf of your hospitals saying they'd like a bit more control on who enters their facilities carrying and at what points they can carry. Happy to answer questions.
Representative Haroldson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So a couple things to keep in mind. One, any leasee of a hospital has that right to make that decision already. It's privately owned or privately ran. So the leasee, like in our community, we have it is a county hospital, but the county doesn't run the hospital. It's being run by another leasee, and that leasee has that right to make that decision. So there's very few county-ran hospitals anymore. So that needs to be understood. In the case where it is a county-ran hospital, there still goes back to the point where, do we have the right to bear arm going into those positions in those places? So if it's a privately owned, they have the right to post it if they feel that's what they want to do. If it's county-ran, I believe that they should have the opportunity and the right to be able to stand up and people have the right to carry into those facilities. So I would ask for you to stand against this and continue the bill in the condition it is.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just want to reiterate something I've mentioned a couple of times, and we did have a handout. Looks like this. It's on both sides. It's quite well cited, and I could produce many more like this. Basically, what I'm saying is that concealed carry holders are not a threat. Concealed carry holders are the most upstanding citizens we have. They're not a threat.
Representative Provenza for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a reminder that some of our hospitals have mental health facilities located within them and emergency services for folks that are in mental health crises. So just want to remind the body of that.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Harrelson, do you want another bite at the apple or are you good? Chairman Zwanitzer?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I do agree with the good comments that were brought from the sponsor of the bill. We do have private entity hospitals and we do have public entity hospitals, and it doesn't seem to make sense that there would be a difference on where you can carry in some but not the others. And I certainly wouldn't want one of our public hospitals to sell out to a private corporation that could enforce these rules. Because again, there's a lot of other issues at play when it comes to insurance. You start letting firearms into hospitals, and the people who insure those hospitals, they rise those insurance rates, which then goes back into all of your insurance plans in the private market, and it does have some effects. Same as I've mentioned with schools on this floor. Allowing carry into schools, which is probably appropriate in many cases, will have an effect on all those insurance rates that they have to have coverage for. So I would ask for this amendment to be passed. We can treat public and private hospitals the same and let them do their own rules on who can carry in and who doesn't need to. Because I do think there are many of our critical access hospitals who would appreciate, having a couple of identified people to have firearms in their buildings in the case of an emergency. There are other hospitals that have their own security forces. They would certainly appreciate knowing as well who's carrying concealed when entering the facility in case there was an emergency. So I think it levels the playing field, but ask for your favorable support.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 125 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 125 has failed. Division being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 2, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, please stand. Thank you. Third reading amendment number 2 has failed, 22 to 37. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 125. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 125 and ask for your favorable consideration. Okay, guys, so
as we've been having a conversation about this entire process, and as I've been working with a couple different departments on their concerns, we needed to add a little bit more language in to help kind of cover some of the mental health facilities that people have concerns about. And so this, if you look under the first portion, page 3, line 12 portion, we're going to insert in there the language or health and human service facilities that are certified by the Behavioral Health Division of the Department of Health to provide residential services. And what that actually is going to cover is going to be community health residential beds, 5 CMHCSs with mental health crisis SUDs, residential beds, the VOA, Southwest Counseling, Cedar Mountain, Central Wyoming Counseling, and the Lighthouse. Sorry, I probably can't say any of that, can I? I'm sorry. It'll cover some places we need to cover. And so I'm sorry that I did breach that protocol, but this is just a conversation that has been brought forward by some individuals that testified in our committee, and we talked about that it would kind of fall under that same umbrella with those agencies as protected places. So there's that. The second portion of this amendment is going to cover the conversation of 18-year-olds in the state. So currently in the state, an 18-year-old could go to a sheriff and could get a concealed carry permit. It's very rare, but it could happen. And we put that phrase in there, we don't want it in our schools. We don't want a student enrolled in a school to be able to go into a school and carry a firearm into their school they're enrolled in. Well, I had an opportunity to speak with the co-signer of this amendment, and he said, what would happen if it was a rival school, where we could potentially have a sporting event at a rival school and a bad situation? I said, absolutely, that is definitely not at all the intention. We wanted to cover that. So we're just opening that net a little bit more and basically stating, if you're enrolled in school, that you're going to stay out of, you're not going to be allowed to carry a sidearm into any elementary or secondary school. So these are just things that, as we've been talking to all of the players involved, I believe these are really good options to help clean some issues up. And I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
Representative Yin for your first time.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I like the first part. The second question for the student and school part is, how do we enforce that at the schools? Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their first time? Second time before the sponsor? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. How do we enforce gun-free zones? You got to just trust people to be law-abiding citizens, and so it'd be something that would be explained to them as they get that concealed carry permit, what would be allowed or not allowed for them. And so I think it really just goes back to just trusting law-abiding citizens to be a law-abiding citizen. So, and with that, I'd ask for your favorable consideration.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 3 to House Bill 125 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 3 has been adopted. We are now on third reading amendment number 4. Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Members that bring, I move third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 125 and ask for your favorable consideration. What this addresses is the issue of concealed carry versus open carry at our governmental meetings. And while I fully support the constitutional right to keep and bear arms for your self-defense, as stated in Article 1 of our great Constitution, I am a little more concerned about the open display of firearms. You can imagine being down here on the floor debating some contentious issue while there's a bunch of people up here in the gallery standing at port arms with long guns. And I don't think that's really about self-defense. That, you know, the open carry of firearms may, in some circumstances, be more about political intimidation than self-defense. And so when I think about the purpose of the bill, And I've talked about this with the sponsor. I think we go too far if we fail to recognize that when one way that we keep firearms out of this building presently is they're all banned, right? So then when you start saying, well, you can bring concealed carry into the building, do we have any language that allows us to simultaneously say, yes, but you can't carry openly in the building? And so that's what this amendment does, bans the open carry, display, wearing of firearms at these governmental meetings. And I stand for questions.
Representative Ward for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against. Constitutional carry doesn't change based on where you are, and constitutional carry means you can conceal carry, you open carry, carry on your head, carry on your foot. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Haroldson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I want to see the holster for the head. That's what I want to see. I don't think that we should ever intimidate. That's never the goal. That's never the desire, is to intimidate. And so I definitely see the heart behind this and the frustration of it. We don't want it to be a situation where we create a conflict or an issue with opening up our good house for the opportunity to protect. And so I would hope that we wouldn't need that. I would hope that we wouldn't need this. But at the same time, I understand the concern behind this. So I'm just going to leave it at that.
All right, anybody else for your first time? Second time before the sponsor? Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You'll notice in the bill that we specifically exempt courts of law from any of this, right? Well, why is that? We exempt the courts of law because we want the courts to administer justice without threat or intimidation. And imagine if you were in a courthouse and there were a bunch of people openly bearing arms in the court proceeding, and they're all for the other guy, not for your guy. Would that court be less likely to produce a just outcome? And that same kind of principle applies here. And I'm a little disappointed that the sponsor didn't more vigorously support this amendment, because I think the purpose here is the same as what we have in the courtrooms. We want courts to administer justice. We want legislative bodies and school boards and city council meetings to reconcile policy questions that are oftentimes controversial. But we want people to deliberate and make those decisions with the best of intent. And it bothers me not if there are people up here in the gallery carrying concealed right now. But I don't want people standing up there in the gallery trying to sway our votes here on the floor by a show of arms. That's not about Second Amendment self-defense. Please vote aye.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 125, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 4 has been adopted. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 5. Chairman Newsom, I think.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 125. This is another bite at that apple that I've been trying to get to. So there are 3 school districts in our state that have enacted the ability to have armed staff in their schools. And I'm trying to protect that group of schools. So what this does is it says any public school or facility, including elementary, secondary, and if the school adopted the policies pursuant to 21-3-132, which is the statute that gives the authority of schools to have armed staff and lines out the training, the training and the way that's going to go, that they will, then any citizen wishing to carry a concealed weapon in any public school district facility, if the Board of Trustees has adopted these policies, shall notify the school district superintendent. So what I'm trying to avoid is an accidental shooting. What I'm trying to avoid is the liability that comes with having someone that comes into a kind of a closed situation. So if our staff members that are armed know the other staff members that are armed, our law enforcement knows those staff members that are armed, and then somebody brings a weapon in, our staff's been trained to identify when somebody does that, and they become the bad guy. So what I would like to have happen is that somebody who wants to come in, pick up their kid from basketball or whatever the chore is that they're doing in the school, and they happen to be carrying, that they just let the superintendent know so that he can notify this armed staff members in the school that this person will be there, that they're not the bad guy. So trying to identify, trying to make sure, as was pointed out, that the people that conceal carry are good guys, but not all of them are, or not all of them are permitted. So I think that what I'm trying to do is to avoid an accident. The other accident that could occur, I can't even talk today, is that somebody comes in, concealed carry, and they see a teacher that's concealed carry. One of our armed staff, one of our staff that's been trained, and they think that person is the bad guy. They think the teacher's the bad guy. So that's the challenge that we face in these 3 school districts, and those are the only school districts I'm talking about. These 3 school districts who have chosen, by virtue of lots of community conversation, it was not an easy decision in my community, I don't think it was in the other communities, that we be able to continue this process. My fear is that if 21-3-132 is repealed, our school districts have no statutory authority to have armed staff. They have no indemnity. They're on their own. So even if they continue even if they continue to have armed staff, they're on their own from a liability standpoint. I'm not sure any school district wants to take that on without the backing of our state. So I hope you'll vote for this amendment as I reworded it to make it clear that it only has to do with these 3 school districts that currently have enacted that particular statute.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to divide this amendment.
Okay, what's your division?
Division number 1 would be line 12, beginning with the word any.
It's got to be whole lines. I don't think we can do part lines. Can you divide? Okay, all right, go ahead.
Line 12, beginning with the word any, through line 15 would be Division 1. The remainder would be Division 2.
I think that is divisible, so which one would you like to start with?
Division 1, please.
Okay, Division 1, Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It seems to me that this amendment has a couple of different ideas in it, and I'd just like some discussion on these ideas separately, if possible. The first part, any citizen wishing to carry a concealed weapon needs to go and ask permission of the superintendent. I would be against that. I think it adds an encumbrance that is unnecessary. And I just want to hear what the body has to say.
Representative Larson for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I read that just a little bit different. I don't think it says anything about them requesting permission. I think it's a notification. And I, at least from my perspective, I think that that's significant in that somebody who has a concealed carry permit coming into the school district, one of these 3 school districts, just has to notify people that they have a concealed weapon and they're going to be carrying, and it doesn't provide the mechanism there for the superintendent to refuse them access or anything there. So I would hope that you would support Division 1 and allow this to be, these 3 districts to be able to continue to move forward as they currently are.
Mr. Speaker, point of order.
What's your point?
I don't believe that, I don't believe it is actually divisible because it refers to a statute that is repealed if Division 2 is not adopted. So you'd have a division, if we adopted it, refer to a statute that doesn't exist anymore. Because in the bill, that statute 21.3.132 is repealed.
Okay, repeat your point.
Mr. Speaker, in the bill, 21.3.132 is repealed. In Division 2, in lines 17 to 19, it actually reverses the repeal or it unrepeals it. But if you adopt Division 1 without Division 2, you refer to a statute that is repealed.
I think that's correct. So, so basically, I'm going to rule that his point of order is in order and that this division cannot occur. So if you want to challenge that, Representative Pendergraft, you can challenge it or you can withdraw your division. Representative Pendergraft.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I will respectfully withdraw this division.
Okay, thank you. All right, Representative, now we're back on the main motion. And I have Newsom 1, Haroldson not up yet, but I have a Pendergraft. So I'm going to go with Haroldson on the main motion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So just to bring everyone's attention back in, we will be seeing another amendment coming up that's going to address the carrying in schools by teachers, the educational portion, and school boards' abilities to address this. So that is something that the more I've been looking at it, realizing this needs to be addressed, and I have an amendment that will address it. That basically the difference between these is that notification piece. And the reason why I'm really struggling with that is on a Monday through Friday school week basis is not really the place where I've got a concern. What I do have a concern is you're going to your daughter's play or something of that nature. Now there's not staff administration there. How is that working? So pretty much we have kind of this non-congruent statute where you're going to find people getting stuck if we're not careful. So I push back on that. We're seeing in other states and everything that this is not an issue. We've not seen this issue. I mean, Utah's 94 to present without an issue in this realm. And so I don't believe that we need to have that clause or that aspect in. So I would definitely suggest let's vote this amendment down. Let's take up this next amendment, which will address our school issue and place that back into statute, which gives our school boards the ability to arm their teachers, bring them training and take care of that portion of it. So definitely on and against this one, and would encourage that we can move on to one that I believe will address our problem.
Representative Bear for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and against the amendment, and a question for the bringer of the amendment. It seems to me that this notification is a difficult thing to really even work, because are we asking them to notify one time for the whole school year, each time they come in the school? There's really no clarity there. So I'd like some clarity on the intent and on and opposed to the amendment.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and opposed to the amendment. A question for the sponsor of the amendment on line 12. The phrase wishing, any citizen wishing to carry a concealed weapon is used. Got a question regarding the word wishing. I mean, what does that look like? Does that mean, when I think of wishing, I think of closing my eyes and making a wish and blowing out the birthday candles? I need a little more explanation on that. On and against.
All right, Representative Craigo for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Just a question for the good sponsor of the bill, and he talked about the notice requirement, and following up, I think the good representative from Campbell County had a good point. What's that notification look like? Because I understand on a weekend, that's going to be difficult. I mean, if we're envisioning a circumstance where you call up the school district, you put your name on a list and say, I'm going to be one of those people carrying in school, and it doesn't matter what day I show up, just be on notice I might be carrying, then that causes me less concern with the notification piece, because at least then when your local law enforcement shows up and who know most, I mean, you've gone through the permit process, they probably know who you are. At least they'd know you, if they see you, you're a friendly face. It would take some of that issue take the divisiveness out of this issue, maybe, if that was the circumstance where you just put your name on the list once, you don't have to notify every time you go to school. That would help me a lot if we could make it look like that.
Representative Ottman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. To kind of piggyback on what the last speaker just said, working in a school for about 15 years, there's lots of instances where you want to make sure that the children are safe and who's coming into the school, whether it be vendors, parents, possible parents, people picking up kids. All of those things in this day and age particularly are of concern. So what happens is you get checked in when you come in the building. There's a buzzer you push, or there's places where you go through metal detectors depending on your community. You do that. Then you go in and you meet the secretary. And most of you that have ever been in a school know the power of a secretary at school. And so what they do is they ask questions. Please sign in. Who are you? Who are you here to see? And that could be added to that. Is there anybody? You can put it out in your newsletters. We're going to ask people that conceal carry to please notify the secretary when you come on. To ask to notify a superintendent, as most of you probably know, superintendents do a lot of things away from the school. So they may not be there for 2-3 days a week, 2 or whatever. And so that really doesn't, it's not really very applicable, because maybe you do have an event. Also, speaking of sporting events, this day, there's lots of rivals and things. There are adults and staff that are at every athletic event. They watch who's coming into the event, who's there. If there's a parent that's a little unruly or someone else, they are approached, and if law enforcement needs to be called, they are. So there is a lot of code checking about people that are coming in. So to me, I guess what I'm saying is this is a policy thing. These people working at these schools, on the school board and in administration, know their area, they know their parents, they know if it's a neighborhood with a lot of criminal activity. So they will set those policies in force for what they need. So I would vote no on this amendment. Thank you.
Representative Clouston for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to just appreciate the bring of the bill for his hard work on this and the compromise and listening. I really appreciate your next amendment that's coming up. And I appreciate the problems with this current amendment. I do want the body to realize and the state to realize what we do currently with the statute that was just removed. But here's what our district requires of our employees. An initial course of training comprised of not less than 16 hours of live fire handgun training and 8 hours of scenario-based training using non-lethal training, firearms, and ammunition. And then also annual firearm qualification and recurrent training of not less than 12 hours with an approved instructor per year. What we're asking the 3 districts that have been implementing this program is that we get to keep this. I think this keeps our insurance rates down and our kids safer. And I would encourage all the districts in our state to look at this. So again, I understand the problems with this current amendment, and I'm looking forward to the next one. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Harrelson for your second time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It is good conversation. I come from a community, there's 3,500 in my town. And I met 3 new officers the other day who did not know who I was. They just moved here, they got hired on. I introduced myself, they're like, oh, very nice to meet you. And it was very obvious they didn't know who I was. They did not know that I was on the concealed carry permit list, I promise you. And so it goes back to a situation where I feel this frustration, I feel this conversation, but I do believe that in the end, I don't know what it actually gains. There's many places throughout the entire United States where there are armed individuals, law enforcement or security staff that are armed, that have to deal with those that conceal, those that don't conceal. I mean, they have to deal with this. So in a situation of a shooting, in the situation of a live fire scenario, you always have to be watching for friendlies. You always have to be watching for those people that are on your side. I mean, this is just a part of the process. Do I wish that it wasn't? Sure, but that's not the reality of the game. And so it's a situation where I do believe that if we were to put this into place and put that notification portion in there, I don't know what it actually gives us. If it's a situation where there's a play and there's 35 people that are carrying in that play, do you know them all? Do you know what they're wearing? Do you know what they look like? No, you got to trust the fact that there's proof that this is working. There's proof that this isn't causing issues. And so I would definitely ask you guys to stand against this. I'm bringing an amendment next that's going to help fix our issue, I believe, and get that training portion back in and protect our districts that are doing this and open it up for other districts. So on and against this, would again ask for a no vote.
Chairman Newsom, for your second time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. So to answer a couple of the questions, I think the notification would happen every time somebody wanted to come into the school. I think that's reasonable because, as was pointed out by a previous speaker, you don't get just to barge into a school. You have to come, you have to sign in, you have to let them know you're there, and I don't think it's too arduous at that point. And if we would need to change it as this bill moves on in the process, to instead of superintendent and administrator or some other term, I think that's reasonable. As far as wishing, I don't know about that term. That could be changed as well. But I think that the key is that what we're trying to avoid is an accident. What we're trying to avoid is someone mistaking someone for a bad guy, or even maybe someone mistaking someone for a good guy who is a bad guy. So I think what we're trying to do is to give the staff at the school who's gone through this training, and I wouldn't equate them to law enforcement or to security. They're teaching. They're doing their job. They're doing their job of teaching, and secondarily, they're there to protect our students. So they should be engaged with the students and not on, like law enforcement, on a constant watch for something going wrong. So I would ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you.
All those in favor of third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 125 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 5 has failed. Division being called. All those in favor, please rise. Thank you. All those opposed, please rise. Thank you. Third reading amendment number 5 has failed, 21-38. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 125. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 125 and ask for your favorable consideration. I kind of feel like I already explained the amendment. So you guys, just really what this is taking all of that, of what we brought out, what we took out, and we're reinserting it in this, giving those school boards the ability to train teachers, arm teachers. So what this does is it doesn't impede our 3 school districts that are currently doing it, and it doesn't impede any of our new school districts from doing it. And so I'm getting a disagreement on the floor, and we'll talk that out, but as we have had, I've had about 3 different organizations as well as our staff here look at this. So this would give us the ability to continue in the training, continue in the arming, and give that opportunity. So would ask for your favorable vote on this.
Chairman Newsom.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I really appreciate the bringer of this amendment and also the bringer of the bill, working with us, with our 3 districts, to come to this kind of a understanding of where we are. This keeps the repeal of that whole section 21.3.132. I can recite that in my sleep right now. But it doesn't take in the whole of that particular statute. But this is a good way to keep our school districts, that we can continue to have statutory authority to have armed teachers in our schools. Thanks.
Representative Larson Lloyd for your first time.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I too would appreciate the effort trying to compromise and working to find an appropriate resolution on this. I think the component that the 3 districts, 4 districts are arguing that this does not address is the 3 districts have, for a number of years, have said, we've got people carrying, and we want to know when somebody else who has a concealed weapon is going to be on the premises, and to notify us so that we can be okay with it. We just need to know that Fred's got a gun. This doesn't do that. This doesn't give, doesn't address that. It's better than the way the bill currently reads, and I appreciate that. My question to the bringer of the bill, because my question to the bringer of the bill is on line 37, where the Board of Trustees in any school district may waive all or part of the training requirements. I'm not tracking why you would want to do that. I think if you go back and look at the history of Wyoming, that's indeed where we have had an issue. And that's indeed where we've had this type of situation come into play, where our children were threatened and impacted, was in a rural, isolated school. And so I would think that this type of training would be as critical for them moving forward as it would be for any of the more populated schools. So if he could explain that rationale, I'd appreciate it.
Anybody else for their first time? Second time before the sponsor? Representative Harrelson.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. So you're absolutely right on the fact that this does not address that notification piece. And I mentioned that before. That was kind of the difference between our 2 amendments. This doesn't address the notification. As far as the line 37 through 40, that was in the original statutes. And the reason that they put that in there, from what I gathered from some research that I did, is they were concerned about schools that couldn't afford the training portion of it, and were wanting to still arm a teacher without maybe possibly having to go through the rigmarole of all of that. So that's kind of where that comes into play, and so that's just the old original statute that was passed in 17, and their logic behind that statute in 17. And so one of the things that we do have is the possibility of a vehicle coming from the other side of this house that could possibly bring some funding in for these school boards to be able to use for this training. And we want to have an opportunity for a place for that to land and to park. So definitely on and for this amendment. And I believe it's going to just continue to make this bill a better bill and give us that kind of that fix that people have been asking for in the realm of arming teachers through the school boards.
Representative Larson, I already asked for seconds, and nobody took me up on it, so. The bringer is done. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 125 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 6 has been adopted. We are now at third reading amendment number 1. Representative Chestick.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 125.
And Representative Chestick, will you be withdrawing that at the appropriate time?
Yes, I will.
All right, thank you.
Members, I rise in opposition to this bill. I know that I'm probably in the minority here when we vote, but I just ask for you to hear me out and think about what I have to say. This is an incredibly important bill. We need to think about this and pause and really consider what it is we're doing here. This is a difficult topic, and it requires a difficult conversation to have. And some of the words I have to say are going to be difficult to say and difficult to hear. But please listen. So you may be surprised to hear this, but I am not anti-gun. I absolutely am not. If you have hunting rifles, you want to go sport hunting, you want to go target shooting, you want to have a gun to protect yourself, I'm not against that. I'm not here to take away your guns. I am absolutely not anti-gun. I am pro-safety. And what this bill does, I think, is make our schools and campuses less safe. Every time I hear about a school shooting, a mass shooting of school, my heart breaks. But I know everybody, every member in this body has the same reaction. It breaks your heart too. I know that. None of us want to see this. We can agree on that. We want our schools to be safe places. The question before the body now is whether this bill makes schools safe or makes them less safe. And I submit to you that this bill actually makes schools and campuses less safe. So let's approach that question from two directions. First, would repealing gun-free zones make schools safer? Or instead, would repealing gun-free zones make schools more dangerous? Let's take the first question first. Would putting more guns in schools make them safer? Just asking the question to me is counterintuitive. How could more guns make a place safer? It doesn't make sense to me. But let's examine the arguments that were brought to the committee and we've heard elsewhere. We've been told that gun-free zones are soft targets and that bad guys prefer a soft target and therefore they're going to come into a gun-free zone because it is a gun-free zone. Is there any reliable evidence that that's true? Is there any scientific studies that prove that that is true or prove the contrary? In the committee, we heard testimony that said that that 94% of all mass killings occur in gun-free zones. On its face, that claim sounds far-fetched to me. The source that was cited for that statistic was government statistics show that. I can't test that. I can't figure out what government said that or what statistic, what test. I have no idea what that means. So my intern and I did some research to see if we could find research that deals with this question. Do gun-free zones make schools safer or less safe? Could go either way. And it's not that people haven't tried to study that. There have been studies that attempt to determine objectively, without trying to prove a point, which is true. Do they make them more safe or do they make them less safe? Almost every study that we found came back inconclusive. They don't know. The scientists, the researchers who do objective research can't tell you whether it's true or not. There was one study in 2019 in St. Louis that found that if you defined gun-free zone to mean just the boundaries of the property, they could not prove it either way. It made no sense. If you broaden that a little bit to say a region, a circle around that gun-free zone, 13% less crime occurred in that larger zone, but that's a weak correlation, and they also said correlation is not causation. We couldn't prove causation. Why was that true? They don't know. So there's no evidence. There's no scientific evidence that creating a gun-free zone makes a place safer. We found another study that said that out of 156 mass shootings between 2009 and 2016, only 10% happened in gun-free zones, basically the inverse of the statistic that was given to us during the committee hearing. When you think about it, it's not really surprising that these studies are inconclusive, because there's really no good way to test this. Who are you going to ask? Did you attack that school because it's gun-free or not? How do you test that question? How do you trust the answers you might get back from somebody who would be a school shooter? So we're told it's just common sense. Bad guys don't want good guys with guns shooting back at them, so they'll go where they think there are no good guys with guns, which is a gun-free zone. That's said to be common sense. But that does not make sense to me, not at all. It really does not make sense to me. Is the possibility that there's somebody concealed carrying in a gun-free zone, is that going to deter a bad guy with a gun? I don't think it will. And here's why. Deterrence is a rational process. The person being deterred has to think about, okay, it's a risk analysis. Am I likely to be shot at? And is that enough to deter me from going into that place and doing what I want to do, shooting up the place with innocent people around? It's a rational process that the shooter has to go through. But are these shooters rational people? What do we hear every time there's a school shooting? You hear, it's not the gun, it's a mental health problem. The shooter had a mental problem. Yeah, and on that one I will agree with you. The shooter probably did have a serious mental problem. Personally, I would hope to find a way to keep guns out of the hands of people with mental problems, but that's not the point here. The point here is that we have to agree that the shooters are not rational people. Are they going to make rational choices about going into a gun-free zone? Are they doing that risk analysis? Probably not. So let's think about, let's assume for a second that the shooter is rational and is going to make these analyses. What are they thinking? What is the shooter going to be thinking? Well, okay, there might be, because this is now a gun-free zone, or there's no longer a gun-free zone, I should say, because it's not a gun-free zone, now there could be people in there who are concealed carrying. Should I not attack? Or maybe I'm okay because I don't know there's going to be anybody in there with a gun, but if there are, I've got a bigger gun. I'm carrying an AK-47 or an AR-15, and I'm ready to shoot. I've got the element of surprise. Somebody with a concealed gun pops up, he's my first target. So I can handle that, thinks the shooter. I can handle that. I'm not going to be deterred by that. But what does the shooter know for absolute certain? If he goes into the school with a gun and starts shooting people, within minutes, don't know how long, it depends on how far away the law enforcement is, but sometime within very quickly, there's going to be a lot of guns, people well-trained, with body armor, with equally lethal weapons, and communicating with each other by radio, all hunting down the shooter. And if that doesn't deter the shooter, why would a possible person with a handgun concealed be a deterrent? We know that these shooters aren't deterred by the certainty of confronting law enforcement within minutes after they arrive. The fact that there might be somebody carrying a concealed weapon is not going to be a deterrent. So let's take the other half of this. Does having guns in school, concealed weapons, make that school more dangerous? And I think clearly the answer is yes. Having those concealed weapons around in the building will make that school a less safe environment. That, to me, is also common sense. So let's take the case of the horrible, horrible situation where there is a mass shooting underway. There's a gun, a shooter in process. More concealed guns means more bullets flying. Where are those bullets going to go? Well, everybody but the shooter in that building is an innocent. There's a lot of innocent people around. More bullets means a higher risk to the innocents of getting injured or killed in that situation. Over the weekend, we all got an email from a trainer up in the Cody area, I believe. Excellent email. He made some points that I was going to make. I don't have to because he made the points for me. That in the situation where there is an active shooter and you have random people with guns also in the gun battle, the police arrive. Who do they shoot at? Who is the real shooter? Who is the good guy? Who is the bad guy? Lots of problems with adding more chaos and more guns into that situation. So putting more guns into the school in an active shooter situation creates more danger, but that's not the main reason why arming people, allowing concealed carry in a school creates danger. We talked about it a little bit already today. What about accidental shootings? What about the gun owner, the concealed carry owner, loses control of his weapon somehow? There's a fight, the gun is taken from the concealed carry person. The person concealed carrying misunderstands the situation and draws his weapon and shoots when in a situation where it's not warranted. All kinds of scenarios can happen. When there are more guns, there's going to be more shooting. And accidental shootings, tempers flaring. There was one study we found that said there were 30 incidents like these, the accidental shooting, the loss of control. In a 4-year period, there were 30 incidents like that compared to only 20 incidents of active shooters during that same period. None of those things would have happened had the gun not been there in the first place.
Let's begin to wrap up.
I'm at the very last right here. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm going to sit down now and listen to the remainder of this debate. I'm sure I'm going to be hearing arguments based on the Second Amendment and gun rights, etc. But please remember This bill is not about, should not be about gun rights. This bill should be about safety. Eliminating gun-free zones does not make the school or campus safer, does not make the community any safer. It makes it more dangerous. Please vote no on this bill.
Anybody else? Are you going to withdraw that amendment?
If there's no further discussion, I will withdraw the amendment at this time.
All right, third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 125 has been withdrawn. House Bill 125 having been read 3 separate times, the question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemande? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart excused. Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrup? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez-Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanitzer Dan? Zwanitzer Dave? Speaker Summers? Are there any changes? Are there any changes? Closing vote? Vote closed. 54 aye, 7 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 125 having received the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 125 has passed the House. The next bill for our consideration is House Bill 203. The reading clerk will read the bill.
House Bill 203, sponsored by Representative Harshman. Property Tax Reduction and Replacement Act, an act relating to taxation and revenue being enacted by the legislature of the state of Wyoming.
There are amendments. Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, I move third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 203 and request favorable consideration. So as we discussed last Friday, one of the problems with the current draft of the bill is that it creates a problem for special districts because they have a mill levy, and if this bill is adopted under its current draft, then the special districts will be able to pay for all of their local needs, not with their own property tax that they have to pay out of their own pocket, but rather they'll be using your money, other people's money. So what this amendment does is it exempts from it says the exemption under this bill does not apply to any mill levy equivalent or mill levy equivalent imposed by special districts listed in this particular statute. We've got that listed. The effect of that is that if you live in a special district, you'll still have to pay property tax. And it'll be maybe $137. Maybe it'll be more, maybe it'll be less. But it does change things. It means that you will have to pay some property tax. As a result of that, it's about $35 million is estimated. As a result of that, you don't have to have the full amount. So this second part of this amendment reduces the tax rate by 0.15%. And with that, I'd ask you to vote aye.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Couple of questions. Is there any place in Wyoming that doesn't have a special district? And then if somebody still can't afford to pay that property tax, then it's still their home, it's possible for them still to lose their home through that situation of not paying. Thank you.
Chairman Harshman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. You know, I had special districts exempted, as we talked the other day on second reading on earlier versions of the bill, and I pulled it out just because it wasn't that much, really. It wasn't that big a deal. I would remind you, though, these all have to be approved by vote of the people, so it's not like you can just spin out a special district, and that's all taxpayers, ag, industrial, commercial will contribute to that. But again, I think it's just a good policy question for the body. I mean, it'll affect people differently. Some counties have more special districts than others. Some have none. Many counties have 0 special districts, and they're just within their operating mills of their county. So I think it just kind of depends where you're at, probably how you'll vote. But you know, I appreciate the good Speaker Pro Tem bringing this. I think it's good discussion. So thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their first time? Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I did try to alleviate this issue with the second reading amendment that reduced it to 1 cent, because I think the bringer of the amendment is correct, especially when you have a service and improvement district. If we paid all the taxes for those properties, you would have service and improvement districts popping up left and right over the state if somebody else was going to pay for their infrastructure. And I wish the sponsor had just brought that entity and not applied it across all other special districts, because I do think then you have an issue. I tried to alleviate that with the 1 cent, so I'm not sure the amendment is needed at this time on this reading, because under the current, it's just the 200,000. It's not quite the same hit it was going to be at all special districts and service and improvement districts as anticipated in the original bill. So that being said, there's still time and we're still doing amendments. Maybe vote this down and we can just do service and improvement districts, and I think I'd be super appreciative and in support of that, but across the board is probably not the right way to go.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, to answer the questions, it is true that if you don't pay your $137 of property tax for your special imposed on you by a special district, you'll lose your house. Sheriff will come take it away, sell it at foreclosure. And if you lose your house for not paying $146, well, that's what happens. That's property tax, okay? So that's what's going to happen. I should note here, community college districts are not included in this, but all the other districts listed in that section are. I think it fixes a problem. Please vote aye.
All right, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 1 to House Bill 203 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 1 has failed. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 2, Representative Bear.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Considering the hour and the 5-page length of my amendment, I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 2 to House Bill 203.
All right, third reading amendment number 2 to 203 has been withdrawn. I'm being asked a question that I'm going to answer before I continue. we'll just stand at ease. I think I'm gonna, is Chairman Zwanitzer around? Somebody go dig up our rules guy. Chairman Zwanitzer, Representative Alaman's gonna ask you a question. I think you're the best one to get the motion right if he wants to make it, and I'm not gonna do any of these until he decides to do that, what he decides to do. So there's a potential motion, so I am not going to bring forward another amendment until that potential motion is either made or not made. All right, I guess we're not going to have a motion, and so the next one is delete the enacting clause, so we'll leave that. And so the next one will be third reading amendment number 4. Representative Yin.
Mr. Speaker, thank you. I move third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 203 and ask for your favorable consideration. Members, this amendment, we're debating amendments, is only 4 pages long. It's not 5 pages, so I thought it was worth debating. Members, I sent you an email of what the effect of this would be. Essentially, we have no sales tax on real property. I think that surprises a lot of people who buy property in the state for the first time. They expect it to just be part of their closing costs and don't realize that they don't have this. So it's a little bit of an unfair comparison when you buy property, but you buy a computer, you have to pay a sales tax on a computer. You don't have to pay a sales tax when you buy a piece of land with a structure on it. So basically what this does is it replaces 0.5% of that sales tax increase with a 2% sales tax on real property. That still keeps the sales tax of real property significantly lower than a sales tax on anything else, but it also reduces our burden of increasing the sales tax to make up for property tax reductions that we are basically reimbursing with both sales tax, the half-cent of sales tax, and a 2% real estate sales tax. Pretty simple. We get about 50 million with the 1%, so 2% 100 million, which replaces that 0.5% of sales tax. And with that, I ask for your favorable consideration. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for their first time? Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to divide this amendment.
All right, what's your division?
Division 1 will be page 4, lines 1 through 19. Division 2 is the rest of the amendment.
Yeah, it's got all the amendments. So I'm going to be honest, I don't know whether it's divisible. And because this bill has become so complicated with all of its amendments, so I'm going to rule that it is not divisible. If you want to challenge me, you can.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'll accept your ruling.
Thank you. Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second? Representative Clouston for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think we need to be cautious moving forward on all these amendments in this bill. It reminds me of a certain French emperor who probably should have dipped his toe in the river before he tried to conquer Russia.
All right, anybody else? Representative Byron.
Thank you,
Shed
Mr.
some
Speaker.
light.
To the good bringer of the amendment, is this a transfer tax or a sales tax?
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Yin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. It says real estate excise tax, and then on page 1, line 18, an excise tax is imposed on the conveyance of real property. So whether it's a sale or a transfer, it creates a sales tax on that full market value of that property. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 4 to House Bill 203 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 4 has failed. We're on third reading amendment number 5. Representative Stith.
Mr. Speaker, members, I move third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 203 and ask for your favorable consideration. What this amendment solves another problem with the bill, and the problem that it solves is that if you eliminate property tax and you put an additional big tax burden onto large industrial facilities, the result is there may be a facility in my county that's worth a couple $1 billion and several hundred jobs that frankly won't happen or may be endangered because it would add an additional $25 million in additional tax. So what this does is that it says that the additional sales tax shall not apply to sales to industrial facilities that are subject to permitting by the Industrial Siting Council. The idea is if your project is worth more than $271 million, then this additional tax imposed by this bill would not apply. Please vote aye.
Representative Hornock for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm not going to divide this amendment, but I just want to ask, how many carve-outs are we going to give? This is where it starts. Do we keep carving and carving on this? This just doesn't make sense. Thank you.
Chairman Harshman for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think this solves a kind of a unique problem in Sweetwater County. There's 2 big projects. One is a current producer that falls under our definitions in this bill already, and they would do just what churches do and governments do. They do labor-only contract. I talked to the CEO yesterday. It's not a problem. This other project, which is companies sold, it's a technically new company, and that's where this bill, or this amendment is so important. So I appreciate the Speaker Pro Tem's work on this. It's really a genius amendment and solves the problem that we've worked on for the last couple days. So thank you, and please vote aye.
Anybody else for their first time? Anybody for their second time before the sponsor? Representative Stith calls the question. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 5 to House Bill 203 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 5 has been adopted. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 203, Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 203 and ask for your favorable consideration. I went through this yesterday a little bit, and to me, this is the Trojan horse of the bill. This is the worst part of the bill. We have a system currently in place to enact these excise taxes, these special use taxes within our cities and our counties that works very well. There's checks and balances on that system right now, as it is in statute right now. This bill eliminates those checks and balances. This part of the bill eliminates those checks and balances. So this bill means that the cities and counties will be able to separate themselves from each other and institute separate taxes. You go from, and sometimes our cities are the border of one city. You cross the street and you're in the border of another city. And so one city could institute a tax at one rate across the street. You have something else instituting a tax at another rate. It really doesn't work well. The current system, as it is in state statutes, works. We have it in place. The cities and the counties know how to implement it, and they use it in good ways. I ask for your favorable consideration to keep our current state statutes as they are and delete this part of the bill, which kind of messes that up a little bit, in my opinion. Thank you.
Anybody else for their first time? Nope. Chairman, question having been called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 6 to House Bill 203 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 6 has failed. Of course. Division being called. All those in favor rise. We need a little stretch anyway. Kind of like the 7th inning. Chip, or Representative Nyman, up or down? Thank you. All those opposed, please rise. Thank you. Third reading amendment number 6 has failed, 2632. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 7. Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd move third reading amendment number 7 to House Bill 203. Members, this amendment just basically does, I'm not trying to unwind everything we did yesterday, the will, the body, but we do need to unwind this, I think. The 1 penny for 200,000 exemption eliminates property tax for only 39% of Wyoming homes. And I just think the important part of this, with 2 pennies for this $1 million exemption, you're gonna get 97% of Wyoming homes. I just think it's so important. It's such a powerful message and a powerful economic tool for our state. So it's pretty simple, it's straightforward. Just gets rid of that 1 penny for 200 and takes it back to the original bill. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Anybody else for the first time? I sense the question is being called. All those in favor of third reading amendment number 7 to House Bill 203 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? Third reading amendment number 7 has been adopted. The next amendment for our consideration is third reading amendment number 8. Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move a third reading amendment number 8 to House Bill 203 and ask for your favorable consideration. I'd like to point out this amendment is sponsored by myself and Mr. Harshman, Rep. Harshman. It's mentioned in the amendment.
Yeah, no names, but
Nevertheless, this amendment freezes the $1 million exemption cap as adjusted for inflation for 10 years. Ask for your favorable consideration.
Chairman Harshman.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On and for this amendment, I hope I didn't hurt the amendment by having my name on it. It's another good idea brought by the sponsor, but I think it sends a signal that this, and you think of all the ideas that this body has put into this bill, from the growth of the exemption to how it goes away automatically, where the governor can reduce the amount if there's an excess in there. And now this, I think, sends an important message. I know any future legislature could override it, but I think it sends our feeling where we're at today on third reading. So I'd urge your aye vote. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Representative Pendergraft for your first time.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. A question, if I may. I remember the first time I ever came into this room, and we sat here for an orientation, and a wise legislator with a lot of experience said, when a bill comes to you and it's on the third reading and there's amendment after amendment after amendment, and I think we're at 23 right now in all 3 readings, maybe it's not ready for prime time.
Are you on this amendment?
I'm asking a question, and I am on this amendment. My question is, I consider myself reasonably intelligent, but if you asked me to stand up and explain this bill with all the changes we've just made in rapid succession.
So Representative Pendergraft, we're on this amendment. There is a delete the enacting clause if you want to debate the bill.
My question is, could someone please explain where this bill stands at this time? Thank you.
All right. Anybody else for your first time? Anybody for your second time before the sponsor? Representative Ward, would you like another shot? Representative Ward.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I think that this proposed amendment sends a good message about the intention of this bill, and that is to keep that exemption at $1 million adjusted for inflation, and as our intention as a legislature to not reduce it for 10 years. This lets the taxpayers know we're serious. So please vote aye.
Okay, all those in favor of third reading amendment number 8 to House Bill 203 signify by saying aye. Aye. All those opposed? No. Third reading amendment number 8 has been adopted. Representative Obermueller on third reading amendment number 3.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Due to my inability to complete my analysis to my own professional standards, I respectfully withdraw third reading amendment number 3.
Thank you. There we go. Thanks. Third reading amendment number 3 has been withdrawn. Wow. House Bill 203 having been read 3 separate times. Doesn't it seem like more than that? The question is, shall the bill pass? Chief Clerk, please call the roll.
Allemande? Allred? Andrew? Angelos? Banks? Bear? Berger? Brown? Burkhart excused. Byron? Chadwick? Chestick? Clauston? Conrad? Crago? Davis? Eklund? Harrelson? Harshman? Heiner? Henderson? Hornock? Jennings? Knapp? Larson Lloyd? Larson JT? Lawley? Locke? Nyman? Newsom? Nicholas? Nemec? Northrop? Oakley? Obermuller? O'Hearn? Olson? Ottman? Pendergraft? Penn? Provenza? Rodriguez Williams? Sherwood? Singh? Slagle? Smith? Stith? Storer? Strock? Stivar? Tarver? Trujillo? Walters? Ward? Washut? Western? Winter? Wiley? Yin? Zwanzer Dan? Zwanzer Dave? Repeat. Speaker Severs? Are there any changes? Yin? No to aye. Further changes? Further changes. Closing vote. Vote closed. 14 aye, 47 no, 1 excused.
House Bill 203, having failed to receive the affirmative vote of the majority of the members elected to the House, House Bill 203 has failed to pass the House. You know, ladies and gentlemen, I just want to say that was, really a good debate on a concept that would have changed our tax structure, but it's the kind of debates we have to have. Maybe not quite that many amendments, but it was a good debate really on all of these bills, and I appreciate that. Everybody kept it good and honest, and I appreciate it. So with that, Mr. Major, let's see, we do have some, I believe we got some reports from standing committees, right? Reports from standing committees.
Senate File 12, sponsored by Agriculture. Meat processing plants, hides, and carcasses, and act relating to hides and carcasses. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 5, Agriculture, State and Public Lands and Water Resources, to whom is referred Senate File 12. Meat processing plants, hides, and carcasses. Respectfully report, same back to the House with a recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Alleman, Allred, Banks, Conrad, Crago, Davis, Eklund, Slagle, Winter. Representative Eklund, Chairman. Senate File 18, sponsored by Tribal Relations. Indian Child Welfare Act, Safe Haven Amendments, an act relating to children. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 18, Indian Child Welfare Act, Safe Haven Amendments. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Bear, Byron, Harshman, Locke, Northrop, Oakley, Storer, Strock, Zwanitzer. Representative Oakley, Vice Chairman. Senate File 37, sponsored by Tribal. Indian Child Welfare Act Delinquency Amendments, an act relating to domestic relations. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 37 engrossed. Indian Child Welfare Act Delinquency Amendments. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Bear, Byron, Harshman, Locke, Northrop, Oakley, Storer, Strock, Zwanitzer. Representative Oakley, Vice Chairman. Senate File 55, sponsored by Revenue. Board of Equalization, questions before the board. An act relating to the State Board of Equalization. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 3, Revenue, to whom is referred Senate File 55. Board of Equalization, questions before the board. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Bear, Byron, Harshman, Locke, Northrop, Oakley, Storer, Strock, Zwanitzer. Representative Harshman, Chairman. Senate File 58, sponsored by Appropriations. Investment of State Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund, an act relating to unemployment compensation funds. Mr. Speaker, your Committee Number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 58, Investment of State Unemployment Insurance Trust Fund. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes. Representatives Henderson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Swanitzer. Excused, Representative Larson. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Senate File 59, sponsored by Appropriations. Federal Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund Adjustment, an act relating to unemployment compensation. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 59 engrossed. Federal Unemployment Compensation Trust Fund Adjustment. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Swanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Senate File 67, sponsored by Appropriations. Public Employee Retirement Plan Contributions, an act relating to public employee retirement. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 67, Public Employee Retirement Plan Contributions, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Swanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman. Senate File 70, sponsored by Capital Financing. Investment Modernization, State Non-Permanent Funds, 2, an act relating to public funds. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 2, Appropriations, to whom is referred Senate File 70. Investment Modernization, State Non-Permanent Funds, 2, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass. Ayes, Representatives Henderson, Larson, Nicholas, Sherwood, Stith, Walters, Swanitzer. Representative Nicholas, Chairman.
Thank you. You know, I'm going to take a personal privilege here. We had that good group of the government class from Star Valley in today, and my sister sent me an email on the 8th grade examination that was in the Pinedale Roundup in April 22 of 1909. And so this was the 8th grade examinations. And I just thought that's interesting, as we all think we're pretty smart here making laws. And so the civil government questions were, number 1, write the preamble to the United States Constitution. 2, name and define 3 departments of government and tell of what each consists. Discuss election qualifications, vacancies filled, in terms of offices of U.S. representatives. Discuss the same of U.S. senators. Describe 3 ways in which a bill may become a law. What sole power has the House of Representatives, the Senate? Discuss the recording of the aye and the nay. Discuss and compare the power of the Speaker of the House and that of the Vice President. Write 6 powers of Congress. Write 5 limitations on the powers of Congress. Give the President's chief duty and 4 other duties. This is 8th grade. I think it's interesting. And I could go down through the grammar ones, and I would fail all of the grammar ones. But it's kind of fun to see what the students of old were required to do. And with that, Mr. Majority Floor Leader, I think unless there's any privilege, I think we're ready for a motion.
Mr. Speaker, I move the House resolve itself into committee of the whole.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. Chairman Larson, JT.
Committee of the Whole will please come to order. Committee of the Whole will please come to order. First bill for our consideration is Senate File 5. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 5, sponsored by Labor, Organ Transplant Recipient Protection, an act relating to insurance. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services, to whom is referred Senate File 5, Organ Transplant Recipient Protection, respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Chadwick, Clouston, Hornock, O'Hearn, Penn, Trujillo, Ward, Yin, Swanitzer. Representative Swanitzer, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Zwanitzer? Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move when the Committee of the Whole rise to report to do so the recommendation that Senate File 5 do pass. I would further move the Standing Committee amendment and turn it over to the good representative who's a district number less than mine.
Representative Hornock.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members, I bring you Senate File 5. Name of the bill is Organ Transplant Recipient Protections. So this bill, what it does is basically defines, I'll walk you through the bill first, and then we'll deal with the standing committee amendment. But this bill defines what an organ transplant recipient is. And we're talking specifically about life insurance companies, life insurance programs. So this bill makes it so that life insurance and long-term care life insurance policies cannot be deleted or amended or something because somebody has or gets an organ transplant. That's basically the gist of the bill. Any policy changes on page 3, they do require justification. And with that, I'll deal with the standing committee amendment. So the standing committee amendment basically clarifies some things within the bill. It adds some clarifying language so that where we're not demanding that these transplant recipients never be denied coverage of life insurance or long-term care, but there is still the ability for the insurer to analyze and study the risk associated with those transplant recipients. So with that, I will move the standing committee amendment number 1 to Senate File 5 and ask for your favorable consideration.
Question having been called and seeing no further discussion on the standing committee amendment number 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Standing committee amendment number 1 has to House Bill or Senate File 5 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Zwanitzer-Dan's motion that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with the recommendation that Senate File 5 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 5 has passed the committee of the whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 9. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 9, sponsored by Education, Parental Rights in Education 1, an act relating to education. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 4, Education, to whom is referred Senate File 9 engrossed, Parental Rights in Education 1, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Allred, Andrew, Berger, Clouston, Lawley, Northrup. Noes, Representatives Brown, Obermuller, Provenza. Representative Northrup, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Northrup?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the committee of the whole rises to report, it do so with recommendation that Senate File number 9 do pass, and I further remove the adoption of the standing committee amendment, which I will explain. If you look at the standing committee amendment right off the bat, we deleted the balance of line after B on line 15 on page 3. And then after that, struck a whole bunch of lines down to line 21, healthcare services. I'll explain that in its entirety when we get to that part of the amendment. And then after that, we cleaned up that because health screening on page 4, line 9, needed to have an amendment that cleaned it up also. So we just took out health screening out of that portion. I'll stand for questions on the standing committee amendment.
Question. Seeing no question, Representative Lawley on the standing committee amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I urge a no vote on the standing committee amendment in whole. Basically, what this amendment does is it pretty much goes at the heart of the question of who has the right to dictate the students' rights and to basically direct the students, whether it's the parents or the schools. The most, I guess for me personally, egregious part is where we basically, in this amendment, the standing committee amendment, we take out any notice to the parents of any sort of health assessments. And the reason given for that is that the parents might then say they don't want that assessment. And that is really the heart of this bill. It helps you understand why we need this bill. It needs to be clarified. What are the parents' rights and what are the school's responsibilities. So I'm no on the standing committee amendment.
Representative Brown on the standing committee amendment.
It is, Mr. Chairman. And Mr. Chairman, I'm going to do it. I'm going to divide the amendment. And Mr. Chairman, what I would do is I would move lines 1 through 11 as Division 1 and lines 12 through 15 as Division 2.
The chair rules that divisible. Which division would you like to start with first?
Mr. Chairman, we'll go ahead and start with Division 2, actually. And this is the terminology health screening. And ladies and gentlemen, let me explain briefly, but with a little bit of detail as to why I moved this particular amendment inside of our committee. So a health screening is not necessarily a bad thing, right? And I don't have a problem with how you will vote on this particular amendment. I truly don't. What I removed in this particular amendment, if you read the language, on subsection C on line 8 on page 4, it says, before administering a well-being questionnaire or health screening to a student or a group of students, each school district shall make available the questionnaire or information on the health screening to the parent or guardian. On its face, that doesn't seem like it's all that serious, right? The problem is what does that interpretation look like? How does the interpretation of this particular piece of information in law get interpreted at the level of a school nurse or teacher? So let's take two particular screenings in general that are conducted very, very regularly. That's a vision screening and a hearing screening. Those are easy to give. That's very easy information to say, hey, look, I'm going to send your student down to the nurse's office. Your student's going to be screened for vision problems and for hearing problems. We can give them that information. Where I came into this is actually the discussion around reading assessments, right? A reading assessment is still considered a health screening. And why is a reading assessment considered a health screening? Well, because dyslexia is actually labeled in the DSM-5. So if we've got an actual health screening to determine whether or not that is something that we want parents to opt out of, is to determine whether or not they want their child to be screened for dyslexia, I think that's something that we should be screening for in the public school system. We're not doing anything negative. We're not conducting anything bad. And we're simply saying, hey, look, we're going to conduct a health screening. That's what we're trying to say here. And I don't have a problem at all with however this body decides to vote on this. And I disagree wholeheartedly that this is an egregious overreach on what we're trying to do with this bill. I still think keeping the language and the rest of the language in this on the first portion of this division is good as well. But this particular piece of information here is literally just trying to protect those that are in the classroom and in the nurse's office on a day-to-day basis. Just trying to say, hey, look, I don't need to go out and every time I'm going to conduct a health screening on something that is routine in nature, whether or not I need to go out and provide you what type of information do I have to give you? Before administering, that doesn't say I have to get permission. It just says I have to provide you information. So the language is clunky in this paragraph as it's written. And that's my concern. If we want to bring a second, third reading amendment to clean up the language, I'm all for that. But as it reads right now, there's nothing about this. It just says I have to administer, or before I can administer, I have to give you this information. So that's the only reason why this particular amendment is in. I look forward to the discussion, Mr. Chairman. Thank you.
Representative Lally on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to just respond to the good representative from the capital city's comments because they're very instructive on what is really the whole concept of parental rights. And it's this idea that the good representative doesn't set the standard for what should or shouldn't be done for any individual child. That is the responsibility of the parents. And this particular division is simply a notice that these things are going to happen. That's all it says, is that they are to give parents notice. And I want to just back up a minute about the whole breadth of what we're doing in this particular bill. I know we're on the amendment, but the bill is about taking what we know to be the parental rights that have already been declared by the United States Supreme Court and trying to help districts understand what that looks like in an everyday setting within the school system. That's what the bill tries to do. And so taking out this portion concerning health screenings to say we're not even going to tell the parents we're doing them flies in the face of the whole point of the parent has the right to know, and ultimately, I believe, the right to choose about those things. So again, on and against. Division 2.
Representative Ward, do you have comments on Division 2?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I was confused whether we were on Division 1 or Division 2, but I'm opposed to both of them. In general, parents, there's no information like this that should be hidden from parents or that parents should not have the option to decline. Parents are the primary stakeholders and caretakers of their children's health and their children's education, on and against both Division 1 and Division 2.
Representative Berger on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question is, should we be thinking, I mean, there's two types of assessments, formative and formal and informal assessments. And do we need to be thinking about these health screenings that are more formal? What about the informal assessments? When a child comes off the playground and I ask, did you fall off the swing set or off the merry-go-round? You know? Did you get hit by a football or a baseball? Do we need to identify those as separate? Just a question, something to think about on this amendment.
Representative Rodriguez-Williams on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against Division 2, there was talk earlier by the good representative about health screenings and some that are done by the nurse, but the reality is that health screenings are really broad. There's some that are done by school counselors when it comes to mental health. There's a depression screening called the PHQ-9 that can be administered. So we really need to think this through, on and against.
Any further discussion on Division 2? Representative Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And I don't disagree. Like I said, I honestly, I'm glad that we're having this discussion. The Education Committee had this discussion. There was the 9 members of this body on that dais, and that's all that I saw in there. And so I'm really glad that we get to have 62 viewpoints on this, because this is really important legislation, and this is a very important piece of information that we're striking here, right? And so I think it deserves full attentive detail to this. And I think that the question brought up from the representative on the west side of the state is exactly the crux of the issue. When we say a health screening and administering a health screening, what exactly are we talking about? If we can define what a health screening is to me, I feel much more confident with that. If a student comes in complaining and wheezing and saying that they can't breathe, before they conduct chest auscultation and they call the parent to say, your child's not breathing, can I perform chest auscultation? And the parent says, well, what is that? Well, that's me listening to your kid's lungs with a stethoscope. Do we really want to tie the hands of our school nurses at a quote-unquote health screening? If we have stuff for mental health, if we have stuff that is in there that we are seriously concerned about, let's label that out. I don't have a problem with that. But what I fear of, and the biggest potential pitfall to this bill is what we're going to be doing to our school nurse staff in case of an emergency or in the case of non-emergent cases where they're practicing what their license says to do. But it's against the parents' wishes, but they didn't go check the computer to find out whether or not the student was allowed, or whether they were allowed to treat the student or not. So if we want to define health screening in second reading, let's do it. Mental health screening, something along the lines of anything along the stuff that everybody's concerned about, right? But when we're talking health screening, it is a broad term. So I worry about this. I worry about this in practice. It looks good on paper. But in the real world, not where we're all sitting here, but in a school nurse's office, this bill reads a lot differently to those school nurses, and we heard from them loud and clear yesterday. They are very concerned with the wording in this bill.
Representative Lally on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, I want to respond to the representative from the far southwest corner of our state. Before I do that, though, I want to point out that what was just said about this is the crux of it. And in many ways, he's right. This is the crux on it. I want to direct your attention to page 4, beginning in lines 3 through 6. And it speaks to the fact that nothing in this section shall be construed as preventing school district personnel from rendering first aid to a student or summoning emergency responders in the case of a sudden need. So that, I think, does answer the good representative's question, that is covered in the bill. And that really is some of what we're going to hear, again, in Division 2 is going to be about whether or not that's sufficient or not. And again, maybe we can work on that language if it needs to be basically tightened up. But to basically in Division 2 say that we are not going to give parents information that they are clearly entitled to according to the United States Supreme Court beginning in 1925 and forward over and over again, the parents' right to direct their education. And to know, to direct, you have to know. You have to know what's going on. And this is a notice provision. That's all it is the notice provision, again, on and against Division 2.
Representative Ward on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against, again, Division 2. Parents have a fundamental right to know, to consent, to decline, to anything dealing with their children's health and their children's education. That is a fundamental parental right.
Representative Jennings on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So on Division 2, I'm on and against. I think this, once again, what the previous speaker just said, I think this is eroding the parental rights law that we already have on the books, and so I would be opposed to it.
Chairman Northrup on Division 2.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So as you hear, this is divided within the committee also. We had a split vote. Everything we had on this bill was a split vote. None of us are on the same page as far as it goes. And for me personally, the nurses came in with a very strong message. Tell us what health screening means. That's all we're asking.
Any further discussion on Division 2? Are you ready for the question? Representative Lally.
On and against Division 2. Basically, again, we did hear some testimony about that there would be challenges in following this opt-in, because let me be clear about what Division 2 does. It basically takes out the opt-out portion of the bill where parents can opt out of certain things regarding treatments and different things that the school would offer, whether it's medication being dispensed or certain other services, saying, I just don't want my child to have that service at school. So that's what Division 2 does. And again, I understand that there is some things that we have to work through rulemaking perhaps, but that makes this not so burdensome. But the fact that it is somewhat burdensome alone does not rise to the level of defeating the fact that there is a federal constitutional right, a U.S. constitutional right, according to the Supreme Court, for the parent to make those decisions. And this Division 2 takes that right away from the parents, on and against.
Representative Zwanitzer-Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I don't actually agree with either of the speakers on what this does, but I'll go ahead and define on the second reading what a health screening is, and then we can all be happy. So vote your conscience. Let's move on. We can define it on second reading.
Any further discussion on Division 2? Representative Provenza.
Sorry, I just want to clarify. This does not take out the opt-out in the bill. It does not do that. So to be clear, the previous speaker who said that this takes out the opt-out, that is not true.
Any further discussion on Division 2? Seeing none. All those in favor of Division 2 to Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, Senate File 9, please say aye. All those opposed, no? Standing Committee Amendment Number 1, Division 2 to Senate File 9 has failed. We're back to Division 1, Chairman Brown.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So, ladies and gentlemen, this, in my opinion, is the larger portion. I do agree with the good chairman of labor. We can define what a health screening is, and I think that will help, right? I think that'll help the nurses. So secondarily, what we're going to be looking at here with Division 1 is really, and I'll probably, again, do what we want to do here. My concern is actually one word in this particular section, but we moved this entire line striking. And so if you look, it's line 15 through 21 to healthcare service. And so basically the language that we're removing says effective school year 24-25 and each school year after. At the beginning of each school year, each school district shall make available to parents and guardians any healthcare services offered or provided at the student's school and provided the option for the parent or guardian to withhold consent or decline any specific healthcare services. This is, I'm going to go ahead and show my bias here, okay? I'm married to a school nurse. I've heard about this bill for going on about 8 months now, and the concern that school nurses have been having with this particular bill. And it really boils down to this term on line 18, any healthcare services. That is extremely broad. I frankly don't care if we vote this down. Go ahead and vote this down. I'll bring a second reading amendment to get rid of the word any. What I have the concern about is what we are potentially doing to our school nurses and going to tell them, okay, if Johnny comes in with a sliver, I have to provide information on what that sliver is because now we have not defined what a health screening is. Now, if Johnny has a rock in his ear, I have to perform that. I have to make sure that that's labeled. Johnny comes in with a concussion, hearing loss, stomach ache, you name it, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. These are the concerns that the school nurses have, right? They're not trying, this is not what this bill is trying to do, is scare the school nurses. We are trying to protect parents' rights when it comes to the mental health being and the things that are being discussed with the counselors and those types of deals. We're not trying to scare the school nurses to death and tell them that if they perform non-first aid, that they need to fear their license being revoked by the State Board of Nursing. So a kid walks in, has a rock in his ear because he fell on the playground, and the parent just wants to, or I'm sorry, the nurse just wants to take the rock out, get the kid back to class. But instead, the way that this bill actually operates, I'm going to have to worry about the other students in the office as well. I'm going to have to go look up this student on the computer, verify whether or not this student has been allowed for me to go in and remove that rock or not. And if not, I'm going to have to try to contact the parent while the parent's at work. If I don't get a hold of the parent, I'm not going to do anything because it risks my license as a school nurse. So little Johnny's going to sit in the office and not be in the school. These are the legitimate concerns, ladies and gentlemen. I don't think what we're trying to do is scare school nurses. I think what we're trying to get to is parental rights and understanding. I appreciate it, Representative Larson. Thank you. I am in the process of trying to make sure that we are doing what is right, not what makes us feel good when we go back home and tell people that we passed a parental rights bill. Let's make sure in practice that this does what we're trying to make it do. Thank you.
Representative Ottman on Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple things. Once again, we had talked about that from a previous speaker, that nothing in this section shall be construed as preventing school district personnel from rendering first aid to a student or summoning emergency responders in case of sudden need. Working in a school for about 15 years, school nurses are like the nexus of the school, second to only the secretary. I mean, they know that. They also have to get parental consent if they have asthma treatments, if they're going to take an aspirin, if little girls need certain products. All of those things need to be run by the parents. And I will say, as far as the definition of, let me see, of health screening for K-12, it's to test blood pressure, asthma, vision, hearing problems, and to make appropriate referrals to follow up. So I don't see where there is a large concern here. So I would just support the bill. Thank you.
Representative Angelos on Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against, I have kids in school, so I think it's just something for a lot of you to know, and some of you are teachers here, that the school nurse, they are amazing. They call on everything. Your kid gets a bump on the head at recess, they're going to call. Your child needs an aspirin, like our last speaker said, they need a Tylenol. If it's after a certain time of day, they won't give it to them because they can't watch them. But if it's at a certain time of day, they'll call. They call to give them a cough drop. All that's documented. So, I mean, they have to call a parent anyways, and they're very good at doing that. This is not going to put any due burden on them. So on and against.
Representative Penn on Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This basically just says that at the beginning of the school year, that they can say what, as the previous speaker said, these are some of the list of things that may be offered. At the beginning of the school year, the parent can say, yep, I'm good with that, I'm good with that, I'm not good with that. But we also need to be keeping in mind, what is the scope of practice of a nurse here? I love nurses, I am a nurse, though I do see patients in clinic who were sent in for different reasons. The nurse says, I have this. And I take a look at them and I may not agree that what the nurse said they have. And so my point is, a nurse may make an assessment and think that they've got whatever it is under control. The example was given, a rock in an ear. Well, if a nurse thinks that she can get a rock out of an ear, as a parent, I'm not sure that I agree with that. I don't think I want a nurse getting a rock out of an ear. That's actually a pretty big deal. Oftentimes can end up in the emergency room with a kid under conscious sedation. And so parents need to be involved in these circumstances. They need to have that contact. And as was said, nurses are pretty good at making that. And so we need to maintain that. On and against this division, thank you.
Representative Lawley on Division 1.
On and against Division 1. And again, I apologize to the body. Earlier, when I was speaking at the very end about Division 2, I was thinking we were on Division 1. So my comments were about Division 1 and this opting out part of the bill and not giving parents the right to do that. We had some testimony that many districts are already doing this, where you can check off at the beginning, and that's, parents are already doing this in many districts in Wyoming, or some districts in Wyoming. So it's not much different than when you go to the doctor and they have to look up on the computer, no matter what reason you've come in for, they've got to look at all your allergies and what drugs you're taking at the time, what prescriptions you have, and what other things have happened to you, and that's the basis of which they decide what to do. And so as parents, the real problem I have with, and why I'm against Division 1, has to do with taking out the whole opt-out process out of it. So if there's some things to help nurses that we could do in clarifying language, et cetera, I would not necessarily oppose that, depending on what it was. But we have, what's been done with Division 1 is we've just taken out the whole opt-out program altogether. So again, on and against.
Representative Andrew on Division 1.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and against Division 1. I think this is actually what makes this bill work. If we don't have it in the computer about what services can and cannot be registered, then you do create a necessity for the school nurse or whoever to contact the parent before doing anything. This gets that up and out of the way up front at the beginning of the school year, so we don't have to worry about any of that going forward.
Any further discussion on Division 1? Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Division 1, please say aye. All those opposed, no? No. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Division 1 to Senate File 9 has failed. We are back on the bill. Chairman Northrup, do you have further discussion on the bill? Oh. Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. At this time, I'm going to move Standing Committee Amendment number 1 to Senate File 9 and ask for your favorable consideration. So last week, you guys, as we were having this conversation on another bill, we had this discussion about if it is the role of the school to hold back information from a parent because they are concerned about the possibility of there being abuse.
Point of order,
Obviously,
Mr.
this is
Chairman.
covered in
Point
statute.
of order, Mr. Chairman.
Representative Stiff, what's your point?
Just so the record and the audio is clear, I believe the good representative had said standing committee amendment and moved that. I believe he meant to move the committee of the whole amendment number 1. So if he could just do that so the record is clear.
Representative Harrelson, can you clarify your motion?
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I move committee the whole amendment number 1 to Senate File 9. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. So back on this, the conversation that we're going to have here is the same conversation we had before. Is it the role of the school or the teacher to be thought police on what they feel or what they think may be the outcome of a situation? If there is for sure concern about abuse or an issue where violence could be involved, we want to make that very clear. That's where they're going to have to contact law enforcement and move forward with that. Ultimately, parents deserve the right through their parental rights to be able to be informed about what is going on with their student, the decisions they make. So just to bring our statute into uniformity, I would ask that we would remove this section. So it's on page 7, line 1 through line 8, and it would be the striking of that. And with that, I'd ask for any questions.
Chairman Northrup.
On and against this amendment, first off, this section says any reasonably prudent person. Of course, that's a legal definition, and one of the lawyers will be glad to define that if we have to go down that road. However, it's the whole point about a kid that is in a household, and not every kid's in the kind of household that we grew up in. There are kids that are in households that they're afraid to go home. The safest place for them is in the school. And so when they're at the school, there may be a foster kid that's in this relationship. I don't know what they are, but there's kids out there that they just need to have someplace that they can go to that's safe, and school's it. And so withholding the fact that he was beaten last night, or whatever the case may be, don't need to have parents don't need to be told that they beat the kid. They already know. So it doesn't do any good to go down that road. I'll continue on later.
Representative Harrelson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So I think you made the point very clearly. In the situation where a reasonable individual notices that, sees that, their legal binding obligation is to contact law enforcement. This has gone way beyond that. At that point, that is definitely not a thought police conversation. That is someone has breached that line and needs to be addressed. What we're saying here is the potential for the option of we think they may, that's where it gets dangerous and we lose parental rights. Now, if it's a situation where a student shows up at a school and has already received abuse or something of that nature, at that point, that they're bound by law to communicate with law enforcement.
Representative Heiner.
Thank you. We've had this conversation just a few days ago, and it just seems deja vu to me. But this goes at the heart of one of the issues that we had down in my part of the state, whereby a school district had a policy to not disclose to the parents because they suspected it might lead to abuse. There was no abuse going on, but they prevented the parents from knowing what was happening at school because of this policy, that if they thought the student would get some emotional abuse at home by knowing what was going on at school, so they withheld that information. That is the heart of this parental rights bill, is to give rights to the parents to know what's going on. And this paragraph right here takes those rights away. It gives those rights to someone in the school to make that assumption. And I just think we don't want to go there, because we want to extend the rights of the parents to the school, not the rights of the school to the home. Thank you.
Representative Provenza.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let's be clear, we removed this section. Not only do they have to call law enforcement, which yes, you have to report abuse, but now I have to call the parents that are committing that abuse, because they have the right to know that I called DFS or that I called law enforcement. That's the dangerous problem here. Not every home is safe. We talked about in committee, in this body, we've talked about 627 kids that are in foster care right now. They didn't choose to be there, didn't just show up there. Things happened at home. Home is not safe. When home is not safe, why should I call mom and dad? No on this amendment.
Representative Zwanitzer Dan.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. On the amendment, so let's say everything goes correct, right? The school district personnel reports to law enforcement and says, that the kid said this parent did X, Y, and Z. Law enforcement, doing their due diligence, goes and interviews the parents and says, we've had some complaints and reports of some nefarious things possibly going on. Parent denies everything. Does parent then get to call the school and say, I want to know exactly what my kid said I did to them? I don't know. I'm not sure. I don't think that's appropriate necessarily, at least while an active investigation is going on. But I also want you to remember, this section doesn't relate to a school district teacher, et cetera. This is to allow the district, your locally elected board, to set into policies and procedures that work for your district. So all of these kind of hypotheticals of what a teacher, a counselor, if a kid has behavioral health needs and they want to talk to their counselor, the patient-client relationship, there's some things for under 18-year-olds with a licensed professional that are protected under the law now. How this comes into play, I'm not sure, but I do think your local school board, working with their attorneys and parents and in public meetings, would be able to find the right way forward that works for that local district. So again, I would ask you to resist the amendment, let local control work, let each school district adopt policies that works best for that community, and let's not have discussion a fourth time on second reading.
Representative Jennings.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So it was brought up a couple of speakers ago, 600 and some odd people. And that is tragic. And it is something that certainly we have addressed in this body and probably need to continue to address. But what we're doing here is talking about a different group of people. Let's not confuse the two. People that are already caught up in this, they're already in a broken home. But what we're talking about in this amendment is for the tens of thousands of other homes. I have no issue with going after neglect, abuse, endangerment of the child, none whatsoever. In fact, I authored a bill saying that very thing, the compelling state interest, neglect, endangerment, and abuse. But here what we're really talking about is parents. Think about it in your home. I'm sure there's not too much issue in your home, hopefully. You're saying that on line 2 and 3, school district personnel will get to make those decisions over whether or not you as a parent get to fundamentally hear about your child. We're not talking about the 600 and some. Now, we're talking about the people who are raising their parents, and they're raising children, and they're trying to make decisions and doing about their life, trying to do the best that they can. And you're talking about allowing school people who do not know that child the same as at home in these good homes. We're not talking about the homes where and there's lots of them. We'd all agree that there's lots of problems. But we're talking about the fundamental right of those tens of thousands of parents being negated, and someone in a school district is going to make that decision. Me, for one, as a parent of 3 kids, I wanted to know all about their lives. I didn't want somebody getting in between me and that child. I needed to know so I could make good decisions. However well-intentioned that school district personnel is, they are not the parent.
Chairman Washut.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just as we talked about the other night, I just want to be clear. It appears to me that this statute is calling for the ability of a school district not to release this information to the parents if they suspect that releasing that information may lead to abuse. That's an entirely different thing than what the statutes call for today, which is if the school or any of us, anyone, becomes aware that a child is abused or is being abused, that we have a duty to report that. This is anticipating the school district coming into possession of some knowledge that they believe, if it's released, that a reasonable person would conclude it would lead to abuse at home. I think they're slightly different, but I think the nuance is important.
Speaker Summers.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. On and against the amendment. I think if you can save one child from being abused, I just think it's worth it. And, I think you got to trust some people in this, right? And it's a reasonably prudent person. Do we want to see children abused? Do we want to see them neglected? I don't think we do. On and against.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Actually, I think everybody that has spoken has good points about this particular set of language, and I think I agree with most everybody. The problem is I'm not sure the language we're talking about covers what we're trying to do. And so, I looked to the good sponsor of the amendment back there, and we're talking about mandatory reporting. And my problem with taking this language out of and not putting something back in is, does this statute override mandatory reporting? I think that's the question we have to answer. If you go to line 2 of the bill, it says, or page 2, excuse me, at the top of page 2, it says each school district shall notify a student's parent or guardian as soon as practicable if there is a change in the student's physical, mental, or emotional health or well-being. That's gonna include abuse or neglect. That language includes those things. I don't know, and maybe I'm missing it somewhere in the rest of the bill, the carve out for actual abuse or neglect under those statutes as we define them. And so I think I'm fine with taking this particular language out. I'm fine with this particular amendment, but I think when we come back, I think we actually need to make a carve out for mandatory reporting so that when we do know of abuse or neglect, that is exempted out of the statute. So if we know of that situation, we're not under an obligation to notify the parent of actual abuse. If a student comes in and says, my parent is doing this to me, we don't have to notify the parent. We can actually do an investigation. This was my discussion I had the other day on the other bill. But I think we could do that in this, and hopefully we can all work together to make that happen.
Representative Stivar.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. All right, I've been down this alley. I've been in school meetings where a teacher looked me right in the eye and said, I know your daughter better than you do. That was a speech therapist. All right, this is not about abuse. This is about parental rights and knowing. So on and forth.
Any further discussion on Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1? Oh, Representative Rodriguez-Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. On and for the amendment. The good chairman mentioned that the safest place for kids in school is in school, and I beg to differ. I disagree strongly with that. Furthermore, I believe that we as a body need to care about the real definition of child abuse. Leaving this portion, or if this amendment fails, essentially what it does is it makes us a sanctuary state for an ideology that's going across this nation called abused trans kids. And that has to do with when a parent is unwilling to affirm their child's preferred identity.
Let's stick to the amendment.
I'm on the amendment. I'm saying what it would do. On and for the amendment.
Any further discussion on Representative Harrelson?
Just would ask that we do strike this out. We've done it once before. We did it last week. And we'll definitely make sure that we have it in here that mandatory reporting is not overridden by this, because that's important. But at the same time, if we do this, we create a thought police opportunity that I don't believe in any way, shape, or form helps us. On and for the amendment.
Question being called. All those in favor of Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, no? No. Chair is in doubt. All those in favor, please rise. All right, all those opposed, please rise. Committee of the Whole Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We're back on the bill. Is there further discussion on the bill? Chairman Northrup.
I just wrap it up by saying I think everybody's made their mind up on the bill. That was exactly the way it was in the committee. We were pretty split, so put it to a vote.
Any further discussion? Are you ready for the question? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Northrup's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 9 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No.
Senate File 9 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 21. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 21, sponsored by corporations. Public Utilities Net Power Cost Sharing Ratio, an act relating to public utilities. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 7, Corporations and Elections and Political Subdivisions, to whom is referred Senate File 21 engrossed. Public Utilities Net Power Cost Sharing Ratio. Respectfully report, same back to the House with the recommendation that it do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Chadwick, Harrelson, Harshman, Knapp, Newsom, Olson, Ottman, Wiley, Yin. Representative Olson, Chairman.
You've heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Olson?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report that it do so at the recommendation that Senate File 21 do pass. I'll move the adoption of the Standing Committee Amendment, which I would like to dispense with first. Actually ask for your no vote on this Standing Committee Amendment. We were playing grammar police, I guess, and we may have gotten it wrong, I guess, after consulting enough sources. So we had a vigorous debate between therefore, spelled with an E at the end, and therefore the archaic version that does not have an E at the end. I figured if I let this Standing Committee Amendment go forward, you'll probably be here late into the evening as the lawyers all debate the usage of E. So rather than do that, I'll just have you vote down the Standing Committee Amendment. And it's existing language, so we'll just leave that alone.
Question having been called on Standing Committee Amendment number 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. Opposed, no? No. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has failed.
Maybe next time. All right, I bring you Senate File 21. This is a lot less riveting and controversial than our last debate, but this is a product of what I mentioned yesterday around this same hour. I mentioned that your Joint Corporations Committee took on the endeavor of trying to address legislation that could mitigate the effects of extreme rate hikes against consumers of public utilities. This bill deals with the net power cost sharing ratio. So we go into existing statute, and the bill is all of page 3. You can see where we amend existing statute to read, if the commission approves any form of cost tracking mechanism pursuant to this section for a public utility to recover changes in electric supply costs between rate cases, then the mechanism shall provide for a sharing of those costs between the public utility and its customers. So basically, a cost tracking mechanism is the scenario where a utility is allowed to recover its actual costs from customers outside of a rate case. So that's the scenario we're in, and all this legislation is doing is saying when we're in that scenario, public utility, you can't pass 100% of that cost to the consumer. You have to, at the very end of the line, lines 8 and 9 really is the meat of what's happening. The cost between the public utility and its customer must be shared. And that's really the bulk of this. That is what this bill does. And I'll take any questions.
Speaker Pro Tem Stith.
Mr. Chairman, so just a question. Is the theory behind this that if you're between rate cases and there's some supply shock or they want to pass on a cost, that the management of the utility should have foreseen that or provided for that, and therefore it's fair to shift some of it, that it's an investor risk to some extent, and so it's fair to shove some of the costs onto the investors of the utility because they should have, they weren't paying attention or otherwise. There was a business risk they took. Is that the theory of this?
Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would agree 100% with the Speaker Pro Tem. That's definitely one of the philosophies behind the legislation.
Is there any further discussion on the bill? Question being called. All those in favor of Chairman Olson's motion that when the Committee of the whole rises to report, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 21 do pass. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 21 has passed the Committee of the Whole. The next bill for our consideration is Senate File 35. The reading clerk will read the bill.
Senate File 35, sponsored by Judiciary. Public Records, DOC Investigations, an act relating to public records. Mr. Speaker, your committee number 1, Judiciary, to whom is referred Senate File 35 engrossed. Public Records, DOC Investigations, respectfully report same back to the House with the recommendation that do pass with the following amendments. Ayes, Representatives Chestick, Crago, Haroldson, Jennings, Nemec, Oakley, Provenza, Rodriguez-Williams, Washit. Representative Washit, Chairman.
You have heard the reading of the bill. What is your pleasure, Chairman Washit?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, to do so with a recommendation that Senate File 35 do pass, and I further move the adoption of the Standing Committee amendments. Then explanation of both will be turned over to the good country lawyer from House District 40.
Representative Crago.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'll run through the bill first, and then I'll tackle the amendment. So what this bill does is include the Department of Corrections Investigative Services Unit within those agencies that can decline a public records request during an investigation to protect the public interest. Oftentimes, this unit coordinates with law enforcement services outside of the penitentiary or other facilities that they're operating in to do investigations. And so currently they're not exempted under the statute. We just need to make sure they are, so when they're coordinating with these other agencies that their records aren't subject to disclosure. The amendment takes out the language put in by our good friends down the hall, the clause upon approval by the Attorney General. That particular language, when we were working in the committee, it didn't make any sense to us. The good director of that department testified they already do that anyways, and the language as it reads into the particular bill just doesn't work. So I would ask for a vote on the Standing Committee amendment.
Ready for the question on Standing Committee Amendment number 1? Oh. Representative Chestick.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I just want to point out that what's popping up on my computer, at least, is not the engrossed version that has the language that we're deleting. So the amendment looks like it's deleting nothing that's in what you're seeing, but in the engrossed version, which is not what has been posted on this website, there is that language. So I'm in favor of the Standing Committee amendment.
Any further discussion on the Standing Committee Amendment? Question having been called in for Standing Committee Amendment number 1. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Standing Committee Amendment number 1 has been adopted. We are back on the bill. Okay. Seeing no further discussion, question being called. All those in favor of Representative Washit, or Chairman Washit's motion that when the Committee of the Whole rises to report, do so with the recommendation that Senate File 35 do pass. All those in favor, please say aye. Opposed, no. Senate File 35 has passed the Committee of the Whole. Mr. Majority Floor Leader.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I move the Committee of the Whole rise and report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
The reading clerk will read the Committee of the Whole report.
Mr. Speaker, your Committee of the Whole, having had under consideration bills on general file, begs leave to report as follows. Senate File 5, do pass amended. Senate File 9, do pass amended. Senate File 21, do pass. Senate File 35, do pass amended. Representative Larson, J.T., Chairman.
Chairman Larson, J.T.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move the adoption of the Committee of the Whole report.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Congratulations, Chairman Larson. All right. Messages from the Senate, and there's a lot of them.
Message number 5. Mr. Speaker, the Senate has completed consideration of the budget bill, House Bill 1. In accordance with Joint Rule 14-1G, the bill has been referred directly to a conference committee of 5 members to meet with the like committee from the House to report recommended amendments for final consideration by both houses with respect to both budget bills, Senate File 1 and House Bill 1, and the amendments thereto. Message 162. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 19, Developmental Preschool Funding, ayes 28, noes 3. Message 163. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 23, Public Utilities, Energy Resource Procurement, ayes 30, conflict 1. Message 164. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 24, Public Service Commission, Integrated Resource Plans, ayes 30, conflict 1. Message 165. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 25, Reclamation and Decommissioning Costs, ayes 30, conflict 1. Message 166. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 41, Banking Division, Classification and Salary Exemptions, ayes 23, noes 8. Message 167. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 42, Low Carbon Reliable Energy Standards Amendments, ayes 20, noes 10, conflict 1. Message 168. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below failed to pass the Senate third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 51, Unlawful Dissemination of Misleading Synthetic Media, ayes 11, noes 20. Message 169. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 52, Wyoming Stable Token Act, Amendments, ayes 20, noes 11. Message 170. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 53, 6th Judicial District, Number of Judges, ayes 30, noes 1. Message 171. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 57, Wyoming Adult Hearing Aid Program, ayes 19, noes 12. Message 172. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 64, Mineral Royalties, Proportional Severance Tax Refunds, ayes 19, noes 12. Message 173. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 69, Hospice Care Reimbursements, ayes 25, noes 6. Message 174. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 72, Utility Donations, ayes 28, noes 2, conflict 1. Mr. Speaker, Message 175. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 73, Concealed Firearms Permit Eligibility, ayes 31. Message 176. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 74, Special Districts, Reversal of Dissolution for Noncompliance, ayes 31. Message 177. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 75, Omnibus Water Bill Construction, ayes 30, noes 1. Message 178. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 77, Homeland Defense, Infrastructure Reporting and Investigating, ayes 31. Message 179. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 80, Solid Waste Management, Definition Amendments, ayes 31. Message 180. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 82, Summer Vacation Preservation Act, ayes 23, noes 8. Message 181. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 83, Revisers Bill, ayes 31. Message 182. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading and by the vote indicated. Senate File 86, School Safety and Security Funding, ayes 16, noes 15. Message 183. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 89, Veterans Ad Valorem Exemption Amount, ayes 25, noes 2, conflict 4. Message 184. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 94, an act regarding compelled speech and state employees, employers. Ayes 21, noes 10. Message 185. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 96, Trusts and Bank Assets and Bankruptcy Clarification. Ayes 31. Message 186. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 97, Prohibition on Distribution of Unsolicited Ballot Forms. Ayes 31. Message 187. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 98, Statute of Limitations, Medical Procedures on Minors. Ayes 26, noes 5. Message 188. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 102, Foreign Property Ownership, Critical Infrastructure. Ayes 24, noes 7. Message 189. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 105, Wyoming Second Amendment Financial Privacy Act. Ayes 31. Message 190. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 109, Prohibit Red Flag Gun Seizure Act. Ayes 31. Message 191. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 111, Mule and Whitetail Deer Separate Hunting Seasons. Ayes 28, noes 3. Message 192. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 120, Driver's Licenses, Unauthorized Alien Restrictions. Ayes 29, noes 2. Message 193. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 123, Minor Name Changes. Ayes 31. Message 194. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 125, Parimutuel Wagering Activities, Amendments. Ayes 21, noes 10. Message 195. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 128, Approval of Charter School. Ayes 29, noes 2. Message 196. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 130, the Equality State, Not Equity State Act. Ayes 18, noes 13. Message 197. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 131, Regulatory Reduction Task Force, 2. Ayes 21, noes 10. Message 198. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 68, Tangible Personal Property Tax Exemption. Ayes 25, noes 6. Message 199. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 99, Chloe's Law, Children Gender Change Prohibition. Ayes 26, noes 5. Message 200. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 107, E-cigarette and vapor material directory. Ayes 17, noes 14. Message 201. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below failed to pass the Senate's third reading by the vote indicated. Senate File 110, School Finance, Cash Reserves. Ayes 12, noes 19. Message 202. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 114, Contractor Licenses, Reciprocal Recognition Requirements. Ayes 27, noes 2, conflict 2. Message 203. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 118, Bighorn Domestic Sheep Relocation, Federal Action. Ayes 27, noes 4. Message 204. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 132, American Rescue Plan Act Appropriations Amendments 4. Ayes 23, noes 8. Message 205. Mr. Speaker, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 54, Homeowner Tax Exemption. Ayes 29, noes 2. Message 206. Mr. Speaker, the Senate appointed Senate conferees to meet with the Like Committee Number 1 from the House on amendments to House Bill 1. The Senate conferees are Senator Kinski, Chairman, Senator Bouchard, Senator Larson D., Senator McEwen, Senator Salazar. Message 210. Mr. Speaker, upon reconsideration, the bill listed below passed the Senate on third reading in an amended form by the vote indicated. Senate File 51, Unlawful Dissemination of Misleading Synthetic Media. Ayes 17, noes 7, excused 7. Sincerely, Ellen Thompson, Senate Chief Clerk.
We're done? All right. Mr. Majority Floor Leader, I think that clears the deck.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the House stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, the 28th day of February, 2024.
Committee announcements. Any committee announcements? Chairman Washit.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 1 will meet tomorrow morning, Wednesday at 8 a.m. in our normal room here, Senate File 32 and Senate File 34 engrossed.
Chairman Northrup.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your committee number 4, Education, will meet upon noon recess as soon as we get a bite to eat. We're going to hear 2 bills, Senate File 61, Educational Charter School Amendments, and Senate File 84, School Facility Use Fees. We'll probably run out of time, so that one will carry on.
Chairman Olson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your House Corporations, Elections, and Political Subdivisions will meet tomorrow, February 28th in E005 upon the noon recess to hear 2 bills. Senate File 22, Public Service Commission Electricity Reliability, and Senate File 79, Malt Beverage Franchise Agreements.
Chairman Zwanitzer.
Thanks. Your committee number 10, Labor, Health, and Social Services will meet at 8:30 tomorrow to hear Senate File 7 and Senate File 15, both on the behavioral health redesign.
Representative Heiner, or Vice Chair Heiner.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Your committee number 9 will meet tomorrow at 8 o'clock in the usual room. We'll consider Senate File 50, Senate File 66, and if time permits, Senate File 44, which I know a lot of the members in this chamber have received emails about, so encourage you to come and hear what public testimony has for Senate File 44. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
All right, anybody else? Okay, you've heard the Majority Floor Leader's motion. All those in favor say aye. All those opposed? Motion carries. We stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow, Wednesday, February 28th, 2024.